All right. Welcome, everybody, to the July 26th, 2023 City of Edina Planning Commission meeting. On behalf of the rest of the Planning Commission, we are grateful you are here, whether in person or tuning in remotely. And I say it every time, but it's your curiosity and participation and feedback that is vital to this process as we navigate change together here in Edina, specifically regarding the way in which people would like to use their land. So I have a few bits of important information before we begin. I'm going to kind of do a rundown of the agenda so you know what to expect, and kind of touch on the importance of, again, that engagement and feedback. I'll start with that. It's important to note that any and all feedback that's been submitted to the city has made its way to us and has been reviewed and will be considered tonight while we make recommendations. Also, the city collects that feedback through either email, a bunch of other means, but especially our engagement website, which is www.bettertogetheredina.org. That's where you'll find most information regarding items that are in Planning Commission meetings like this regarding land use. So agenda, what to expect tonight, we'll kick it off, do roll call. We'll approve both the minutes from last meeting as well as tonight's agenda. Then we have our community comment period, which is your opportunity as a resident to speak about a matter not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes to do so, get into kind of the specific process of that when that's up. On the contrary, we also have a public hearing tonight, just one, and that's your chance to speak about an item on tonight's agenda. And this one is a preliminary rezoning and site plan and subdivision for 5100 Eden Avenue. After that, we have our reports and recommendations. And then we followed up with chair and member comments, staff comments, and then we adjourn. So that's a little bit about what to expect tonight. And with that, we will kick the meeting off. So I'll call the meeting to order right now. And then we'll do roll call. Carrie.
Commissioner Bornstein.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Day.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Feld.
Here.
And Chair Bennett.
Here. All right. So next item, we have the approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Welcome a motion, or if anyone proposes a modification to that, welcome that too.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Next, we have the approval of the prior meeting's minutes from June 28th, 2023. Similarly, welcome a motion, or if there's any proposed modifications, welcome those, or discussion around those first.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. All right, now is the period for community comment. So we'll welcome anyone who is here in person. If you'd like to speak about a matter not on tonight's agenda, please come up to the microphone, state your full name and address, and you will have 3 minutes to speak when the green light turns on. 30 seconds remain when it flashes amber, and then red means your time's up. We'll ask you to wrap it up. Anyone here for community comment, please come forward. There we go.
Good evening. I have more information for you. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. At the June 28th Planning Commission meeting, you granted a variance to the Drooling Moose. Their chocolate is very good, by the way. That has nothing to do with this, however. And it turns out that that public hearing was not given public notification. There was nothing in the Sun newspaper, which is the public notification vehicle for the city. I checked all 5 weeks of that week and prior. It was not in there. Why is that? So, with that said, also, the variance, there are basically two different categories of variances according to state code, state statute. One is a use variance, and the other is an area variance. An area variance has to do with setbacks, physical size of the building perhaps being enlarged to be closer to a setback, or outside of the setback rules, height variances, things such as that, the physical aspect of the structure of the building. However, the variance was for a use allowed according to what planned industrial district is for that property. And use variances are not to be used to change what zoning says you can do. You have to change what the zoning allows first before you can change the use, or if you get my drift. According to Minnesota statute 462.357, subdivision 6, please look this up. Sometimes a landowner, this is on Minnesota, or League of Minnesota Cities website. Sometimes a landowner uses a variance to allow a use of their property that is not permissible under the zoning ordinance. Such variances are often termed use variances, as opposed to area variances from dimensional standards. Use variances are not generally allowed in Minnesota. State law prohibits a city from permitting by variance any use that is not permitted under the ordinance for the zoning district where the property is located. And use was used in the staff report. It was used in the discussion about this property. You need to be very careful how variances are voted for or against, and take this into very serious consideration in the future. In my book, that should not have happened that night. It should not have been approved because it was a use. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here for community comment? All right, seeing none, we'll close community comment and move on to the next item on the agenda. Yeah.
I could respond if you'd
Yeah.
like. So in regard to the notification for the project, it was properly noticed. For variances, notification in the local newspaper is not required. We just notify property owners. I believe it's within 300 feet. That did take place. So it was properly noticed. And in regard to the Drool and Moose and whether it was a use variance, staff did check in with the city attorney both before the public hearing and after, and confirmed that that use is allowed. They can have retail within 10% of the building. So that use is permitted in the district. So we did, and our attorney does not believe it was a use variance. The variances were to the performance standards that regulated the use that is permitted. So that's it.
Thank you. I encourage, if anyone else has any comments or suggestions, send an email to city staff. They'll route any of that correspondence to us for us to consider. But appreciate the engagement. All right, now we're going to move on to the public hearing tonight. We got one public hearing, as mentioned, and I'm going to give a quick rundown of what to expect for that. But anyone who is tuning in remotely, just to get prepared if you'd like to speak during the public hearing, please call 786-496-5601 and enter conference pin 2407-064#. And press star 1 on your keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak, but you can just hold on right now. As for what to expect during a public hearing, staff has put together a report based off of the applicant's submission. and they will provide a presentation to us based off of that. The Planning Commission will ask questions, get answers from city staff, then we'll turn it over to the applicant to provide their presentation, and we'll have a similar exchange. After that point, we open it up to the public hearing, which is your chance to speak for up to 3 minutes, similarly to the community comment period. After that, we'll close that and we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate and make a recommendation to the City Council regarding approval or denial of the request. So with that, welcome Planner Teague to the table.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. So this is a project that's located in the Grandview District on the west side of 100, across from City Hall here at the intersection of Arcadia and Eden. Here's a look at the existing building on the site. It's the Eden 100 office building. It's about a 38,000 square foot building, often referred to as the building on stilts. You can see the parking underneath and around the building. So the site is guided in the comprehensive plan for mixed use center. It's all of this purple area. Here's the site itself. So notice that it is quite a large area with that mixed use designation, but it's encompassed by several different zoning districts that allow all of those uses that are contemplated in the comprehensive plan. So the purple areas are PUD, the orange are planned office districts, the red are retail districts. We have a senior housing project, so there's a whole host of different zoning designations within that mixed-use center. And again, this site is zoned planned office district, the use that's there. There have been a number of studies done in the Grandview District. These next couple of slides come from the Grandview Development Framework, a document that Chair Bennett was very involved with 10 years ago or so. So again, this site guided for mixed-use center, and there were a number of examples of what might happen on that site that were included in that document, and we discussed a lot of this at sketch plan. The idea was to have some type of row housing, townhouses along Arcadia, 3 to 4 stories, and then with height behind it. And the uses contemplated there could have been additional housing or maybe office. So here's the rendering, and again, we looked at this quite a bit at the sketch plan review. So this is Arcadia, and the idea was to bring buildings up to the street, hide the parking, have lesser height along Arcadia with the taller buildings behind. Another view of that plan. This is the old public works site. We also did a transportation plan in the district. And note that on both sides of Highway 100, a new frontage road is proposed. Example here, when the Perkins site, currently under construction across from City Hall, the area here that was owned by Perkins extended all the way to the freeway. So as part of that project, they dedicated land to the city for the future construction of that road should it happen. So you can see on this side of the road, the site we're looking at is right here. All of the right-of-way from Highway 100, there's no additional right-of-way needed on this site. That frontage road could be accommodated within the existing right-of-way. So we're not looking for additional land with this project for the Grandview Transportation Plan. The applicant did go through sketch plan. This is some of the renderings that we considered. The thing to note here is at the sketch plan, the first level was to be the first level of parking. So there wasn't really much street engagement at all. A couple other examples there. And here is the proposed site plan that we looked at. So they've made a number of revisions based on the feedback that you all provided at sketch plan. They increased the setbacks on all sides, really. It's now 10 feet. At sketch plan, the building came as close to 4 to 5 feet. Not a significant change when you compare the previous plan to this, but nonetheless, they did increase setbacks slightly. They reduced the mass of the building by fully burying the parking, so they're digging down deeper. The building now has active street frontages, including walkout units. We'll see some pictures of that in a minute. They added a commercial space in the northwest corner of the building, including an outdoor patio. They've added a public park along Arcadia. They've expanded the sidewalk network to be on the west side of the building now, the east side of the building as well as the north. And they've added building step backs away from the street and enhanced the landscaping. So here's a look at the building that's proposed. You can see the street engagement. The retail space here, it's about 3,500 square feet. It's a one-story. It would be a one-story portion of the building, and then it steps in, and then at the top of the building, it steps in again. This is the park here to the south. This is the main entrance for residents and users of the commercial. This would be a service entrance. Moving around the building, you can see the pedestrian sidewalk. This is the corner. The building is not stepped back at the corner. If I back up here, you can see there's no stepping back at the Arcadia and Eden like there is on the north portion of the building. And the architect will go into more detail about building materials as part of their presentation. Here's a look at the site plan. So again, the retail, the northwest corner with the patio, the public park, the one main parking entrance. They've eliminated the vehicle access off of Eden, and you can see the new pedestrian walkway all around the building. So this request requires a rezoning from that planned office district, and they're proposing a planned unit development. So the PUD is the tool that ensures the city has affordable housing within the project. It also is the way that we make sure that the sustainable buildings policy is met. So in return for providing those things, which drive the cost up, the applicant is requesting flexibility to those underlying parking development standards to add density to the project to make it pencil. So the flexibility that they're requesting, and we'll go through a performance table in a minute, but it's in regard to building height, building material, building transparency, first floor ceiling height, building setbacks on all sides, floor area ratio, and building coverage. So there's a lot being requested here. And again, the PUD is the tool that we've used to ensure affordable housing in a project and that the sustainable building policy is met. They're also requiring its preliminary site plan, as well as a subdivision or a replatting of the property. Right now, this site consists of 7 smaller lots that are basically combined and held under common ownership, but they'd like to clean up that legal description for the property with basically combining those 7 lots into one. So some additional comments about the site plan. In regard to parking, based on our new parking ordinance, 166 spaces are required by code. There are 183 proposed here. Stantec did a traffic and parking study. They've concluded that they need at least 176 spaces, so there would be adequate parking for the project. They also did a traffic study. Basically, it was when the project across the street, the city project with the senior housing and the restaurant and the park, as part of that traffic study, they included 136 units for this site. The conclusion of that study was that there's no roadway improvements necessary, other than the ones that are taking place out there today. And so Stantec took a look at that study and reaffirmed those conclusions that there's no additional modifications to the roadway system needed. Ed Terhar is with us this evening. Should you have any questions in regard to traffic or parking, he's on the call virtually. So here's a look at the flexibility that they're requesting through the PUD. So again, all setback on all 4 sides. This is a 4-story, 48-foot height maximum, the height overlay district. They're proposing 7 stories and 82 feet. Variance to building coverage, maximum floor area ratio. That first floor building height of 20 feet, they're requesting 13 to 14 feet. And in terms of Building material, we require 60 feet from the ground up to a 60-foot elevation, that be entirely brick on public-facing facades. They're proposing basically at the corners here, not all the way up. And in terms of transparency, we require 75% transparency at ground level. They're proposing the 75 feet for the commercial space, but 40% for the residential, which is, as we're seeing since we adopted that ordinance a few years ago, it's tough to meet that 75% requirement with a residential project. So that might be a code requirement amendment that we consider at our work plan when we discuss that later this evening. So primary issue for the commission to consider, is the proposal reasonable to justify the new PUD zoning district for the site? Because of an argument can be made both ways on this one, both for and against the proposal. So staff has outlined alternatives in the recommendation in the staff report for you to consider. Just a reminder, our pyramid of discretion. Again, with the rezoning, the city has complete discretion whether to approve or deny the project. So getting into that primary issue, I thought I'd run through the PUD criteria. The code says that the purpose and intent of a PUD is to include most of the criteria that we'll go through. So the first one is provide for the establishment of a PUD zoning district in appropriate settings and situations to create or maintain a development pattern that's consistent with the comprehensive plan. The site is located, there's 4 streets, roadways on all 4 sides, including a freeway, an arterial, and a collector roadway. The closest single-family home here is over 800 feet away. The site is guided for mixed-use center. The uses allowed here are consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the residential, retail, and public space. By introducing more residential uses in this primarily retail area, that has the potential to enhance and vitalize the existing businesses in the district with the ability to walk to those retail uses, and also could increase the number of transit users. Second is to promote a more creative and efficient approach to land use within the city, while at the same time protecting and promoting health, safety, comfort, aesthetics, economic viability, and the general welfare of the city. This proposal would certainly create a more efficient and creative use of the property than what's there today. There's no surface parking, everything is hidden, which is another one of our goals in the comprehensive plan. Pedestrian movement all around the site, much safer with boulevard-style sidewalks, and that east and north side pedestrian connection that was recommended by the Planning Commission. And again, promoting that economic viability in the district. The third is provide for variation to the strict application of the land use regulations in order to improve site design, operation, while at the same time incorporating design elements that exceed the city's standards to offset and affect the variations. So some of those desired elements that we look for, sustainable design, this project, and they have agreed to meeting the sustainability policy. They'd be working with Grace Hancock in making sure that that happens. Landscaping, enhanced landscaping, stormwater management that would be taken care of underground, pedestrian-oriented design, podium height, they have incorporated that podium height on the north side of the building, and transition to residential neighborhoods. So again, yeah, they're asking for some pretty significant variations to our land use regulations in exchange for that affordable housing, a sustainable building, hidden parking, enhanced landscaping, that stormwater management, dedicating property to the city, or at least for public use of that park on Arcadia. Fourth, ensure high quality of design compatible with the surrounding land uses, including both existing and planned. So the building would be high-quality brick, architectural cladding, and again, the applicant will go into that in more detail. Would be required to be constructed to meet the sustainable buildings policy, which increases the quality of design. Staff would recommend, in the alternative for recommendation, that brick be provided all the way 60 feet up on that public-facing sides of the building. We would recommend that as a condition of approval, should you decide to approve. The project would maintain the efficiency of public streets and utilities, that fifth item. Preserve and enhance site characteristics. There's not a lot of site characteristics to preserve on the site. It's mainly with the large parking lot and building. But they would enhance the landscaping, higher quality trees, enhance that pedestrian experience around the building. The project does allow for the mixing of land use. They're including housing, retail, and the park. Key element here is the provision of 14 affordable housing units within the project that helps the city meet its goals for affordable housing with the Met Council. And the last is ensuring establishment of transition between land uses. As I mentioned, this really is the beginning of the transition into the district. The design development framework contemplated higher buildings closer to the freeway as it transitions into the node. So this really is the beginning of that transition. So with that, again, we've outlined two alternatives for the Planning Commission to consider, both for and against. Staff is, however, recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in the staff report. With that, I can stand for questions, and the applicant is here to present as well.
Thank you, Carrie. Wonderful presentation. Any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Strauss.
I had it here. Okay. Director Teague, in the staff comments, I mean, that was a very impressive staff report. It ran almost 19 pages. That's a considerable amount of effort there. Thank you. I mean, that was good.
A lot of detail there.
Yeah, I know you have a good staff. The one of the reasons for denial was not consistent with the Grandview District Development Framework and the 7 guiding principles. Is this something you could maybe help me with? What do you see that this project is not served by this project? I mean, those guidelines.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the guidelines for the Grandview plan would have envisioned different than this anyway, but.
Yeah, staff believes that they do, that it does. Does it match exactly what was envisioned? You know, we had a lot of discussion last time about having townhomes along Arcadia with the height behind the building. So does it match that plan exactly? Well, no, it's not designed to be exactly what has to be built there, but.
But those Grandview guidelines were 10 years ago, right? I mean, that was I think just concluding before I even started, my activity.
They were
here.
the 7 guiding principles.
So the whole district, I mean,
ago.
but perhaps, Chair Bennett, you have some. Maybe you will come in on this. Okay, I'm sure you've got something then. Okay, I'll wait to hear that. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Director Teague, for going through the presentation. Just a couple questions. One on the building height. So I know in the planned office development, POD, it is looking at a 20 feet height on the first floor. And then I know the applicant is coming in between 13 and 14 feet. But what's the reasoning behind the 20 feet? What was kind of the thought process behind that? If there's like any practical concerns that had to be met, or was it just purely a design type requirement?
Yeah, it was really a design feature that came out of the the Southdale Design Experience Guidelines, 20 feet being able to be repurposed for a multitude of uses. And we put that into effect maybe a couple of years ago, and we seem to be getting a lot of feedback that it doesn't work. It costs a lot to heat and cool. It's not very sustainable. So it might be, again, one of those regulations we want to take a look at next year. But that's where it came out of, is the Southdale Experience Guidelines.
Gotcha. The other question on the fenestration, so I know it's 75% fenestration on the first floor, but I think the way how this is designed is that we also have apartments on the first floor. And because of that, 75% would be on the commercial side, but then 40% on the apartment side. And this might be a question for the architect, but is it possible to even design an apartment with more fenestration beyond the 40% that is contemplated here? So maybe that's a question for the applicant.
It could be. Is that practical? I think that's one thing when we talked about that 75% requirement. It was, again, more focused on the Southdale district, and I don't know if we were thinking a lot about residential on main level. It's pretty wide open for residential use at 75%. But.
And this last question for now is for, I think, the traffic study. And so I know we have someone on the line here that could help address some of that. But the question that I have on the traffic is that as we bring more residential vehicles, et cetera, into this area, I would expect a lot more cars going up Arcadia Avenue. And I could see on Eden Avenue, you could take Eden Avenue to go eastward towards, 50th and France in that location. You could also take Eden Avenue to go more west to connect onto Vernon to go westward. And you could also take, I think it's also Eden Avenue, the exit onto 100 South to go southward. But if you want to go north on 100 North, most likely you'll take Arcadia Avenue, go up to Vernon, take a right, and try to get on to the northbound loop to go north on 100. That section where Arcadia hits Vernon is very congested. And I think in some of the traffic studies, it said that the service level is an E in the morning and a D in the afternoon. And it was kind of highlighted as yellow, like we need to fix this. But then also in the traffic report, it said that when this building is developed, we'll take a look to see what we need to do. So I'm trying to reconcile, is the traffic situation something that we have to address right now? Or are we saying that we know it's a problem, it might be a bigger problem with this development, and then we'll address it later? I just want to get a sense of what is the solution for the congestion on Eden Avenue and Vernon as traffic increases in that area.
Sure. So we did take a look at that intersection. It was included in the public works site study, and we reran those same analysis that they used for that site, and basically the results were very similar. So it's showing that even though we have a little bit additional traffic with this site, there still is enough capacity to maintain those same levels of service, the D and the E that you talked about. D and E are considered acceptable in an urban area, so they're not something that needs to immediately be fixed. But if there was some significant change, more significant than this in this area, there may need to be some additional look at that area. It's a fairly, there probably isn't a real quick fix for that. It's like you said, it's a congested area. You get to Arcadia, and really your only option is to take a right. So there's going to be times when that could be congested when there's enough traffic on Vernon. There are other options to get to 100. You can go Eden to the other side, and you can get to the ramp on that side as well to go north to 100. So that is an alternative. So if this did become congested, that could be an alternative route.
I just to add to your comments, what would be a data point that the city would look at or the state would look at before someone jumps in to try to solve the traffic issue? And what would be a solution for that? Is there any practical things that could be done to alleviate the traffic in that area?
Well, we're pretty limited on the access points. I think what we have today is what's going to be there in the future. So, there really isn't a whole lot additional you could do. I mean, an extreme would be to close that access point to Vernon and force people to go a different direction. I mean, I don't know that that's practical, but in a situation like this where you have, Arcadia you're forced to take a right turn onto Vernon, that's really your only movement. Adding more lanes isn't going to help that. So oftentimes it's a situation where if it becomes congested enough, people will find a different route.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith? Anyone? Okay. Commissioner Felt?
I'm going to piggyback on Commissioner Smith for a second about a traffic question. I noticed in there is some reworking of the alignment on the exit ramp from Highway 100 going south up on Vernon and 50th. What is the timeline for that? Is that happening now? I hardly ever take that exit, so.
Yeah, so there's no timeline for the frontage roads at this point. In 2025, the Vernon Bridge is to be reconstructed, as well as that little bridge over the railroad tracks that leads to the Holiday. That whole section will be reconstructed. I don't have those development plans here to show, but that is planned for the area. The idea is these, the loops on this side of the road would go away, as well as that exit off of 100 toward City Hall. That will be straight kind of in the location of where the frontage road is shown here. So there are going to be some improvements in that area that are scheduled in the next few years.
And some alignment on the roads as well. It's a little confusing on that north side now on Vernon getting off, and everything's not lined up. But there seems to be some aligning of some of those roads to kind of make it a little clearer. Do I have that right?
I may have to ask Ed for some help on that one, if you're following that question.
Yeah, I think you're talking about on the east side of 100, where the loop ramps are.
I'm talking about just on the west side of 100, where the southbound, going from 100 north of this site, the southbound exit, right now kind of veers off a little bit and it's going to straighten up. Is that happening with that frontage, when the frontage road is planned and there's no time for that?
Yeah,
I would imagine that would be happening at that time, yes. I guess I'm not familiar with what's going on the west side.
Chair Bennett is nodding his head yes.
At least what's proposed, it does include all that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the plan now. It's a diverging diamond interchange,
Okay.
but all of that part you're talking about is included.
Okay. And it sounds like 2025 is going to be a painful year. Okay. Oh, and I do have more questions, but not on traffic. And just because we have a lot of community comment on this, on the zoning plan and the comprehensive plan and the small area plan, can you talk a little bit? We've got our zoning guidelines, which have been around for a long time, and we kind of slowly change as times change and things come to us. And we have our comprehensive plan that we do every 10 years, and we're going to get ready for our next comp plan. And then we also do these small area plans, and we did this Grandview district plan a dozen years ago. So all of those are kind of looking at a magic ball and looking at what's coming up, and then we have things come to us, and we have to review them based on what we know. So I guess I'm asking, is for you to give me a synopsis of, do I have that right, or what is your thinking on that?
You do. So the idea behind the comprehensive, well, we can use this district as a good example. The idea behind the guidelines or the mixed use designation in the comprehensive plan, that land use designation allows for a lot of different uses within that district. Within this district, we have many different zoning districts that allows individual uses that are allowed under the comprehensive plan, but might not allow another use. So the idea behind doing it one at a time like this, if someone wants to change a land use, the site is a good example where office is only allowed there. We do it on a case-by-case basis where we can require some of these additional things that the city is wanting: sustainable building, affordable housing, the main two, where we can write that right into the zoning ordinance for that site. And we can do it on a case-by-case basis. It gives the Planning Commission and the City Council the discretion to say yes or no. Mm-hmm. Another way of doing it is we could rezone the entire site to allow people by right to do those kind of developments. It becomes difficult establishing specific standards for everybody, but that is another option. That's not the option that's been chosen back when the 2008 comprehensive plan was done, and then continuing on with the 2018.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's it. I was going to ask a little bit about that. So the Grandview plan, there are 7 lots now, and I suppose I didn't look closely at, if they are individual lots, what could be allowed on there. I'm suspecting that not as much building would be allowed on each of those individual lots, and we'd have a smaller number of possible residential or expensive townhomes on there. It might that's a wild stab, but that's what, and maybe this is for.
Yeah, why it was platted with 7 lots like that, I didn't research the history on why that was. I'm not sure.
Okay, so that platting, a surveyor will survey the whole property, and then it's just a legal description, and they go through the city and go through.
It's just creating that preliminary plat that was one of the many pages in your packet, but it basically just combines all those and creates a new legal description for just the one lot.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Day.
I guess I'll stay a bit on topic as it pertains to traffic. One thing I wanted to bring up, and I didn't really see it addressed in the packet, was this letter from the Department of Transportation to Minnesota and around the noise policy. And I guess the line that stood out to me was that Minnesota Rule 730-030 states that municipalities with the authority to regulate land use shall take all reasonable measures to prevent the establishment of land use activities which are listed in the MPCA's noise area classification. So I guess really the concern here is the noise and the residents complaining and the possibility that the noise from the highway will exceed what is allowed, and what our, I guess, responsibility is in, avoiding that. And then I guess, perhaps the developer can address too, what's the plan for mitigating that? So.
Yeah, oftentimes in projects like this, we can require a certain type of glass that's going to mitigate that noise. That is one discussion I have not had with them, so that would be a good question to ask the development team.
Okay, all right. But so a clarifying question on this, is this letter basically telling us that, unless we take action to help mitigate that we're, prohibited from allowing that use to take place?
Yeah, I think they're making us aware of it, and we should address that as part of the conditions for it, should the city decide to approve.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, then just a few general questions. It's just, maybe not quite as on topic, but one thing that came up today when I was reading through ordinances, again, I try to refresh myself every time I come to a meeting. This was just a general one around rezoning, and there's around signs, and that the petitioner for rezoning has to erect a sign the frontage, like on the frontage of the land, saying, this property is proposed for rezoning by. Does that exist on that site today, and do we do that everywhere around the city? I guess I've never actually seen it.
They do, yeah. It is posted. With this one, they've got them angled so you can see them from two different frontages. They sent me some pictures of it.
Okay.
But the signs are out there.
Yeah, I meant to drive by today, but I was running late, so I didn't have a chance. But again, just a general knowledge question. And then, again, another general knowledge question as it pertained to the parking here, and the developer put a lot of emphasis on EV parking, and I'm guessing, so I didn't get a chance to read through our parking ordinance, but does our parking requirement distinguish between electric vehicle parking and internal combustion engine parking at all? Like, so say if a developer comes in and says, our ordinance says you need 180 parking spaces, for example, right? And the developer says, I'm going to limit all these to be EV parking. How does that align with our current parking ordinance?
Yeah, we don't have that distinction in the parking regulations. We've got the EV ordinance that allows you to do them, but the number of parking spaces doesn't say that you have to have so many EV spaces.
Right. And or the vice versa, right? I mean, in terms of you can't limit it to one or the other.
Right.
Okay. All right. Just something as we go through our work plan, I was curious about. Okay. I think that's it for now.
Yep.
Turn
There's
it
still
back over.
plenty of time for questions.
All right, I had a couple. So on the brick, just wanted to make sure I understand staff's recommendation. How many sides of the building are you recommending that there be brick going 60 feet up on? All sides or some sides?
Yeah, we really have a four-sided building here, so it would be all four sides.
Okay. And that's because there's a public realm component
realm
to each side of the building?
On all four sides, right.
All right. Do you know why, maybe brick isn't included in the proposal right now? Do you have any idea of the background on that?
Yeah, I think the applicant can answer in
Okay.
more detail, but it's a cost measure, what they can and can't do.
All right. Does the commercial space meet the transparency requirements?
Yes. Yep.
All right. I have a couple other questions, but I think I can ask them to the applicant. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't have any particular questions except maybe could you just speak toward the pyramid of discretion and maybe show that? And I know you say we have complete discretion, but not yes and no. And maybe just remind us commissioners as well as people
Sure.
watching kind of why this matters.
Yep, so this is the pyramid of discretion. The area, and this was actually put together by our city attorney, so the author is with us at the city. So with a building permit, as long as somebody meets all of our standards and they're not required to come before the planning commission, we're obligated to issue a building permit. With a site plan review is basically a checklist. If someone wants to build a new commercial building, they're required a site plan review by planning commission and city council. And if they meet all of our zoning standards, the city is really obligated to approve that project. Conditional use permit, as we move down the pyramid, the city has more discretion. With a conditional use permit, while it's not in the red zone, the city can add conditions that might mitigate the impact to adjacent properties, add landscaping, things like that. But if they meet all of our other standards, we're really obligated to approve that conditional use permit. We just can put additional conditions on that. With the subdivision and plat, again, we're somewhat limited if they meet all of our standards, but again, we can put certain conditions on it. Variances, we're getting into more discretion. We've got the criteria that we follow, and oftentimes variances can really go either way. It's on a case-by-case basis. But when we get into the green, where we're rezoning property or doing an amendment to the comprehensive plan, it's really up to the city whether you want to approve or deny. You're changing a land use on a property. So you have discretion, and this is one of those cases that you have discretion to say yes or no.
I guess specific to that, this is just zoning, so at least if this went, at least it's not a comprehensive plan amendment, which would require a supermajority vote by the city council, so there's that distinguishing factor
Yes.
of approval.
Yeah, that's a good point. With a comprehensive plan amendment, it takes 4/5 vote of the city council. With a rezoning, it takes 3/5 vote.
And I guess on that note too, I mean, just something else to consider, and I think you highlighted it well, is the amount of requests and nonconformities within each of them. It seems like you listed maybe 7 specific things or 8 specific things, which, are there other things that aren't exceeded that are mentioned there? It seems like most things are on
Most
the table.
things are exceeded, correct. This is a list of them. The density requirement, that is allowed by comprehensive plan, so there's no variance there. Or if they were over the density, then it would be a comprehensive plan amendment and get into that 4/5 vote. They do meet our parking regulations, and they meet our setback requirement to single-family homes. It's based on the height of the building. You multiply times 4 the height of the building. In this one, they need a 328-foot setback, and this is 830 to the closest, so no flexibility there. But the flexibility they're asking for, the variations from code, are pretty significant here.
Could you share with the, well, I could ask the applicant too, but could you share with us some of the feedback the city council provided after us at the sketch plan, as well as if there were additional meetings with city staff and some of the things that were considered to kind of move? Because there's evident change from the sketch plan to now, and just curious as to any conversations that happened or details that influenced certain elements.
Yeah, that's probably a good one for them to respond to. There were a lot of similar comments to what the Planning Commission raised in the City Council. I can't think of anything that they raised that you didn't off the top of my head, but might be a good one for them to ask
Just
too.
curious if there was discovery of other things that were constraints or opportunities. But thanks, that's all I have. Any other questions? Commissioner Felt?
One response. What I heard from the city council, from the mayor specifically, was put height on 100, and which is part of the Grandview plan.
Thank you.
That's it, yeah.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes, just 2 questions that just came up in my head here. And this is related to POD versus PUD. So if I'm understanding correctly, based on the requirements for planned office development, this would not work. And so we are considering PUD. And I heard that, like the PUD would allow for affordability in housing, as well as sustainability goals to be met. So the planned office development, could we require sustainability type objectives or affordability objectives in that?
We could not. The housing wouldn't be allowed. And if they came in with a brand new office building, but it met our setbacks, height, maybe there was a variance here and there, we could not require them to meet the sustainability policy. Straight zoning, state law doesn't allow us to go over and above building code requirements, the state building code. But through this PUD, we have the mechanism to do that. So that's how the sustainability policy is written. Anytime you're asking for a rezoning, we're going to require that as part of that negotiation.
So planned office development is a state zoning requirement, and right? Am I saying that correctly?
It's the city zoning regulations for that site that just allows office.
So if we were to do a comprehensive plan change in the future, we could write the sustainability goals and the affordability goals into the plan office development zoning?
Probably a question for the city attorney. Can we really do that in a straight zoning district, require something above and beyond the state building code? I'm not sure that we can.
Okay.
Hey, just one thing to add on to that, maybe for discussion. I mean, if anyone were to propose 20 units or more, they're subject to the 10% affordable. But the opportunity you have with PUD is you can write a time frame into that, right? So then it holds it more than just that quick exchange, correct? So I mean, that's part of one of the benefits.
It is.
And why it tends to be most affordable housing developments that we've approved have been PUD, to kind of better protect us as well. Like to write 20, 30 years or something, it has to be fully affordable. I don't know if this really applies since it's only 10%, but if we were to go above the threshold, then that could be written in, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that was my next question too. So 10% at 50% AMI, and that's 14 units, and we could request it be 20 units at 60% AMI. Is that within scope for us as well?
You could make that recommendation. Ultimately, the city council would decide.
to decide.
You might want to get comment from the applicant on how they might feel about that, but that certainly could be a condition, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That reminded me of one question. Could you remind us of the number of affordable housing units the city is hoping to achieve by 2030 and where we're at now? Do you have any rough ideas?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where we are now. We have some of our affordable housing advocates. They might know that number off the top of their head, but we're asked to do 1,804 units by the year 2030. We have, I don't believe we're 50% of the way there yet. Maybe in the, oh, it's lower than I thought.
I thought we were about 30%. About 20%, 25%, somewhere in there. Okay.
That said, I don't believe there is a city in the Twin Cities that has met an affordable housing goal, or just a FYI. The goals are very lofty.
We'll get straying off topic, I guess, but the general question around that goal, where did that number come from? How was that formulated?
Yeah, it comes from the Met Council and all the criteria that goes in. I'm not exactly sure. It's divided, supposed to be divided equally amongst the 7-county area.
Okay.
Based on what you have for affordable housing now and what you don't, and a number of factors that go into it.
Okay. Something I'd like to learn more about and how that number was established.
I guess with that, thank you, Carrie, and we'll welcome the applicant team up. Please introduce yourselves and on with the presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. All right, good evening. My name is Nick Moran with Opus Development. Thank you, Director Teague. Good evening, Chair Bennett and Commissioners. We're really excited to be in front of you tonight. Thank you for the comments and the questions. Want to obviously leave plenty of time for those, and wrote most of those down, but may have a few to just address again as we jump into that. Similar to our sketch plan, we're going to jump into our presentation, but also recognize you're familiar with it at this point. So we'll probably just spin around the site and share some of those changes that we've made based on the feedback we heard from both the sketch planning commission as well as city council. And certainly we'll answer all questions you have. Just to kind of mention at the beginning, a lot of our comments from City Council were very similar to your comments. We had very few, if any, comments that weren't addressed at Planning Commission. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Theo, and he'll kind of spin through some of those major changes that we made, and then certainly want to open it up for questions after that. So, Theo.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair Bennett and Commissioners, for having us back to present some of the changes that we've made based on your feedback. We truly appreciate the process that we've gone through with Director Teague and with you guys in the City Council, and can honestly say that all the comments have made the project better, and hopefully you guys agree. So I'm just going to kind of start at the northwest corner and swing around the property and the project and talk about some of the changes that we've made from our sketch plan. Some of this stuff Director Teague has already gone through, but we just want to point out that we did take a lot of your comments to heart and made some fairly significant changes to the project. So starting at the northwest corner, the corner that ultimately faces kind of the center of Grandview, we placed a single-story retail space at that location. You can see from this graphic, that's this kind of lighter box here, with some fairly significant step backs to the tallest portion of the building, really, in essence, opening up our project to the heart of this district. Around that, to the north and to the west, we have some patio space for that retail. Depending on what ultimately lives there, that could be a very good activating use for that space, really connecting that single-story commercial space to the sidewalks that we proposed as well. So moving south from there, we are proposing a minimum 10-foot wide promenade down Arcadia from that retail space all the way south around the corner. Thinking that this could kind of offset some of the art walk that was proposed on the other side as part of the guiding principles, and that ultimately didn't look like it got included in the Applewood Point project. But really trying to widen that up, make that as public and as gracious as possible, opening that up to a public park as well. So you can see right in the center of our project, kind of a half buried and half elevated park. I know that sounds weird, but this site is sloping quite a bit from north to south, and so we're trying to connect this park onto that sidewalk as best as possible. And so on the north side, it's a little bit buried, good for seating, and then it kind of falls away to the south, and so you kind of get this like stair element that cascades down to the south. A lot of landscaping in here. Just on the street side there also is street parking that we're including, and the boulevard grass in between the two. That sidewalk continues south and connects down to the southwest corner. And here now we're at the lowest grade that's visible from street. We've taken away the 15-foot retaining wall. We're really connecting this corner back to the street, back to the sidewalks. Again, a lot of lush landscaping around here. A little bit of a plaza right outside there as well. But this is where our lobby, leasing, and some of our residential amenities live. So when we get to the renderings, we can show you that there's a lot of glass there. There's a lot of connectivity to the street right at that corner. We felt that was really important for this site. As we move around Eden, again, the site starts sloping back up. The first half of that facade is, again, residential amenities, so a lot of glass showing along that facade. And then as the grade rises to a point where it almost fully buries that first story, we get residential units on that side. So this is kind of that discussion about transparency where we have commercial or amenity space, public or semi-public space, we're meeting that 75-foot transparency. Where we start to get into the residential zones, it drops down to that 40%. And I think to answer somebody's question, 40% is kind of on the high end of what we see in the market for residential right now. It's typically around 35%. We're opening it up just a little bit, but still allowing privacy for those residences. And then there's the kind of logistic thing of there's stuff on the wall there that has to service that residence, and so we need wall space for that. Along Eden, you can see we have an 8-foot wide sidewalk that kind of meanders along there, flanked on both sides by boulevard trees and trees along the side of our building. We're going to place some public amenities along that sidewalk, like park benches, and then on the farthest east side, a fix-it station for bikes. So as you come along Eden Avenue, or as you're coming out of Grandview and going along the north and east side, there's a location for you to fix your bike, fix a tire or something, or your chain if something falls off. And then we're proposing a pedestrian walk and bike lane on the east and north side. So I think this was born actually directly out of one of the comments that was made here at Planning Commission, where somebody coming from the old Perkins site or City Hall here and going into Grandview previously would have to go down towards the roundabout and then back up Arcadia. This allows a much flatter and much simpler route into the Grandview district. And so we thank you for that comment, and we were really kind of excited about that one and excited to put that one in there. Along the east side then, you can see also we have some walk-up residential units along that side. So not quite the row homes that were illustrated in the guiding principles or in the framework plan, but something similar. You know, these are walk-up units that have kind of that neighborhood feel, and we're, you know, looking to the future where that neighborhood road comes along that east side. And then that pedestrian walk and bike lane continues around the north side and connects back to the retail. So really what we were trying to do with this is, in plan it looks fairly similar where we're opening up to the west. But like Director Teague mentioned, we pushed it down a floor, really connected our amenity deck to the public park and to Arcadia, and then therefore to the district. And then as well as started to carve out that northwest side so that we really kind of open up to the district. I'm going to flip through a couple of these. We did a couple of site sections to just show some of the setbacks that we're proposing. So originally we had about 4 to 5 feet at our closest location to the property line. We've increased that to a minimum of 10 feet all around. You go back to the site plan and really that's at the closest corner here and here. Otherwise, it really steps back from this kind of wandering property line all the way around. And so 10 foot is the minimum, but there's quite a bit of space in between the building and the property line. And then you take into account the extra wide right-of-way along Eden, and we really get a lot of space that is, you know, considered public space. So this section cuts east to west looking north through our amenity deck, through that public park, through that widened sidewalk, the green boulevard, and then Arcadia. On the opposite side, you can see this is that kind of cut around sidewalk and pedestrian and bike path that runs on the east and north side. So again, a good space back there for the pedestrian experience. On the left-hand side, this is right outside of our lobby, looking at that little plaza that we're creating, kind of right outside of the roundabout. And then on the right-hand side, this is adjacent to that on-off ramp, would be a patio for a retail space. And then again, another one, this is the west-facing retail space along Arcadia, outside of that retail space. And then this one also really highlights the step backs that we are providing along that part of the building. And finally, this last one is on Eden, showing just the distance that we have between our building and the curb edge, 40 to 45 feet along there. Really allowing a lot of space for a widened sidewalk, a couple of public amenities, and a lot of lush landscaping there. So this is at the roundabout, looking at the the lobby and leasing space and some of the public or the resident amenities right on that corner. So you can see a lot of glass right at that base, carries up an additional level, and then above that is, the start of our residences. Also, on the right-hand side, right over here, we do have another little plaza that we're proposing as part of like a work-from-home area. If somebody's in there and they want to step outside and take a phone call or something like that, trying to get a little bit more of activation on that Eden side. And on the far right, you can see that meandering pathway going up Eden Avenue. This is as if we're floating over 100 looking north, just to give you an overview of that Eden Avenue side and the east side as that trail cuts in between our property line and the building. And then we're looking south now at the northeast corner. So along here is that trail that runs around two sides of the building and then connects with our retail plaza. This is our one-story retail space, and then our step backs and an upper story amenity space that starts to activate that as well. This corner we're activating with a fitness center, a little bit of massing relief right at the corner, as that is kind of the pinch point of the project. But again, lots of glass to try to keep that light and airy. And then we're at Applewood Point looking back towards the project. So the art park right in the center, the retail off to the left, and the lobby leasing off to the right. So really trying to activate as much of this street as we can. As you remember, Eden Avenue has some access easements that we weren't able to get around, and so all of our access has to be off of Arcadia, and really trying to work around that and activate as much of the space as possible. And then up on top, again, another resident amenity to try to kind of liven up that space. And in the center, beyond the park, would be our resident amenity deck. And then that's just another view looking from the north. And I'll talk a little bit about materials. I know that that's been a point of discussion. We are proposing this mix of materials, which is about, on the public side, is about 50% or 52% brick and 48% architectural cladding. We think that in the market, that very much meets the market, very much fits in with the context of the old Perkins site and the site next door and the Avador. All three kind of have that similar mix, and so we're just trying to fit in with that as well as that's a fairly typical mix for a residential project like this. We are focusing a lot of that brick on the corners, so each corner the brick goes full height all the way up to the top of the top floor, as you can see here, here, and here. And then we kind of wrap that with this more delicate champagne-colored ribbon that kind of runs around the building and creates a little bit of a datum and a little bit of playfulness around the building. So I think I'll leave it there, and we're available for questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Looking around, questions, fellow commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
I could start. Overall, I think all the feedback looks like it's incorporated pretty well. And at the end, when we have comments, I'll add some more comments, but just a couple questions. So this is a great shot here. You can see, I think the stairs coming off from where that car is. If you look from, yes, in that area, you're gonna be running down those stairs, and then you gotta stop because you're gonna run into the street. Is there a way that we could connect, maybe like a crossing or something like that, from the stairs to the other side? I think Jasper Properties might be on the other side with the nursing home. Not the nursing home, I shouldn't say that. The senior home. I'm just thinking, yep, right there. Is that something, because there's no stop signs, you could be zooming up and down that street, right? And you might want to have a feature to slow folks down a little bit. Just let me know what your thoughts are on crossing Arcadia right by those stairs, and how can you slow the traffic down?
Sure, I can share this on. Yeah. Yes? Yeah. I think a crossing would be nice somewhere. I think we talked about that a little bit at the beginning when we started talking about at sketch plan. I think we mentioned, talking to MnDOT about maybe eventually the on-ramp to the north gets abandoned and we can start looking at some sort of connection across Highway 100. I think some sort of connection would be nice. If you're at the north side of the site, you might line up really well with where the walkway to the that's being built to the parking garage is. So I think that's something to consider. We've talked a lot about that parking entrance. We are glad that there was one opportunity to have a curb cut on Eden, if I remember correctly, and it just was becoming a challenge. We would have had stacked cars. It just really wasn't working with the road at all. So we do like that we have the one parking entrance, but we do recognize there's going to be traffic there, and we have a sidewalk crossing it. So how do we sign that properly? How do we slow cars down? How are we bringing guests in? How are we bringing residents in? We mentioned all of the parking. We have retail parking considered on site. So you're going to have some of that transient parking happening in that garage. So that's something that we definitely want to continue to kind of work on. What is that can slow people down? I think the nature of the changes to Arcadia are going to have a pretty significant impact, being that both sides of Arcadia now, on our side as well as on the west side, are going to be more of that boulevard with the parallel parking, the bike lane. It's kind of going to slow things down naturally, I think. I think we all hope so. But we're certainly open to, I don't know if we would be the ones that would initiate a crosswalk, but we'd certainly be in favor.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And, I don't expect you guys to figure out everything there, but definitely you'll start seeing cars parking on the street. I think it's a 2-lane, if I'm not mistaken. It might just go down to 1 lane. And then, just being sensitive to how you cross that street, I think would be important. I think you addressed building materials already, so thanks for doing that. Service vehicles like garbage trucks, you're going to pick up. Where exactly do you envision a service truck or service vehicles coming in to pick up or drop off any kind of material?
Yeah, this service entrance right at the north side, that services both the retail space, and we have an internal trash room in here for the residences, and so that would service both of those.
And that would be trash deliveries for the retail, and it would also be move-ins for the residents. So our move-in elevator would be off of that as well. So we're trying to really put everything into that area to get those trucks, whether it's moving trucks or trash or deliveries, off of Arcadia into that area.
Perfect. I know in some of the reports there was questions about the mechanical room. I know some buildings have mechanicals that would exist outside the building. Some of them put it on top of the building. I'm guessing the mechanicals for this building would be at the top of the building?
The mechanicals for the units?
Yeah, like AC systems. I'm guessing the elevator systems is all going to be housed within the main vein of the building. I just saw some questions from staff on, we need to make sure that the mechanicals you can't see it. There's some kind of screening. I just wanted to ask that question to see if that was also addressed.
Well, maybe on the mechanical, the type of mechanical system for these units are actually all self-contained within the units. So those are in each unit individually, so there won't be 136 air conditioners on the roof, as you may see in some other projects. There will be some mechanical systems as far as elevator overrun, maybe some shafts, some venting and things like that. All of that would be screened either with a parapet, or if the parapet's not tall enough, it doesn't meet code, then it would need to be further screened.
Gotcha. And I think Commissioner Day asked a good question about noise, and I did also read the MnDOT letter, but I just browsed it. I didn't go as deep as probably you did. But help me understand that a little bit, what that means. Does it mean that you guys have to mitigate the sound from the roadway, right? And I'm guessing that sound is going to bounce off of your building and bounce to the other side of the highway, potentially. And maybe your mitigation be trees or different materials. And I heard Director T talk about glass to absorb some of the sound. But what is the state asking that you guys do with regards to sound management on this site?
Sure. Good question. I'll touch on a few other projects and relevant experience, and then kind of some things that we've incorporated. A couple projects. We have a project in the North Loop that's called Variant that we don't own anymore, but we developed in 2017. That sits right on, if you're familiar with where 394 comes into downtown, it's elevated. And our project sat directly across the street, so sound was something that we were concerned about. Very similar here. You've got the highway right there. We will conduct sound studies. The last thing we want are units that nobody wants to live in. That doesn't work. We can't have empty units. That certainly is not the intent. So we'll run sound studies. And then what that usually determines is what is the STC rating of the glass that we have to have. And that's a rating that I can't tell you what that acronym stands for, but I know that the higher the number.
Transmission coefficient.
See, we have to have the architect answer that one. But we, in some instances, will determine that you have to have a higher STC rating, and that, therefore, in simple terms, thicker glass that doesn't allow as much sound in. So we have a lot of experience both locally as well as across the country. We've got a project we just did in Denver that's right on I-25, as close as this project, and we did a similar thing. Looked at a sound study and looked at the sound kind of continuation, how it's coming into those units, and making sure that we have a environment that is suitable and works for our residents. Last thing we want is noise complaints constantly.
Absolutely. Last question for now is on affordability. So, we definitely appreciate, bringing in those 14 units into this property. At 10%, I guess it's 50% AMI. Just two questions there. The first one is, just the distribution of those units. When we build affordable housing in a building like this one, is it just randomly assigned within the units, or how do you determine, where those residents would go within a building of this configuration? Sure,
and I'll admit, every city's different. Every municipality we've worked with takes a different approach, and we always work closely with the municipality on that. But it's typically a percent, so that 10% will be a percentage of our unit mix. So if we have, for example, say we had 20 two bedrooms, we'll have 2 that will be affordable. Now, in other cities, we have had where the cities have said, we appreciate that and we like that, but we'd actually rather have more 2s, or we'd rather have less studios or whatever it is. And we have that flexibility, certainly, to work with the city. Where they end up in the actual building, also driven by municipality and developer conversations. So certainly open to where they land within the stacks. But typically, it's the percentage of your unit mix that we see that's pretty standard, but again, we certainly have flexibility there.
Gotcha. And just to kind of add to that a little bit, I know we tend to use that 10%, that 50% AMI, but there's other ratios, right? It could be, and I kind of mentioned this a bit earlier, like 20% at 60% AMI, or 30% at 75% AMI. From a business perspective, would all those different configurations be equivalent, or like how do you guys think about affordability and number of units, or is that something that's driven by the city as well? I'm just trying to understand if those ratios could be adjusted and not just be 10% or 50%.
Sure, we certainly run several models that look at all of the different options, and ultimately the majority of our projects that we do kind of across the country end at that 10%. That's financially about where it continues to work. If we moved beyond that, we likely would be looking at asking for TIF and possibly looking at other opportunities to bridge that gap that we would have in the financials.
Gotcha. All right, thank you so much. That's it for now.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Felt.
I appreciate you're not asking for TIF, that we don't have that climb to do too. I want to piggyback on the affordable housing units and Because I think I have heard that there's a need for more 2 and 3 bedrooms and not necessarily studios. I don't know the mix of people coming in here, and it might be good to work with staff on that a little bit. If there is, how many 3 bedrooms are in this?
I don't think we have any 3s currently in the program.
Just
we have
2s?
the largest that we have are 2+ dens. So I would
2+
I would
dens.
call that a larger 2-bedroom. Maybe I think we maybe get to 1,600 feet on the top, maybe a little larger on the top floor. Has some larger units, but what I would call this the stacks below maybe
Okay.
12 or 1,400 at the highest end, size-wise, square footage.
Okay. It'd be nice to get some feedback, what the community might be interested in. Just give it to the city and work with you on that mix.
And by way of example,
Just because families are, right? I mean, young families who need a place for their kids is important. Go ahead.
yeah, and by way of example, we had a similar conversation on a project that we're just wrapping up in the city of St. Louis Park, and they said, hey, instead of, this many 1s, can we get another 2? And we ultimately just kind of did a swap, if you will.
Okay.
Certainly open to that conversation.
Okay. Yeah, because I think there's people that know what's needed. And
Yeah, if I might, they oftentimes, should the project be approved, they would work with our affordable housing manager and work out the mix of 1s and 2s, and then that would get written into the development agreement that ultimately the council approves.
Okay, thank you. Can you, with these renderings up, so the brick is kind of the softer white and the metal panels are the brighter white? And so the brick goes all the way up on the corners? And
That's correct.
And also kind of is the brick on the first floor over there?
Correct. Yeah, this metal panel kind of outlines it, for lack of a better term. So at each corner we have it going all the way full height. But then most of the first floor or the pedestrian edge is that brick as well. And then almost entirely front Arcadia and Eden is brick and or glass and metal panel.
And then those corners, those kind of setback corners on the southwest, those are brick all the way up?
Brick all the way up here, brick all the way up here, and then this is brick as well.
And then that entire courtyard is metal panel and...
Yeah, it's an architectural wall cladding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the deck, the main level of the deck, that's brick too?
This part is kind of outlining where our resident amenities is. So this is where people kind of come in and out of the building, and you like to have that nicer material right there where you're right next to it.
Okay. And can you show me the southeast side too? The south? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so this is brick full height. It runs all the way across here, continues along this way, and then brick full height right here at this corner.
Okay. And then it's metal panels under that datum line to the right of that?
It's that architectural wall cladding, yeah.
Okay.
Not metal panel.
Okay.
And then this is that metal panel that kind of wraps around.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to double up on Commissioner Smith's. So Arcadia is very active now, which is great. I like that. The corners are very active. And we do have the truck access, which is, right, food deliveries, linen deliveries, good deliveries, garbage. So it's going to be pretty active. And so is the parking access. I like the fact that they're set back, and so there can be a little bit of stacking there, or the truck can sit there. And you had mentioned this, and my concern is kind of like paying attention to getting across those parking access, just giving visual clues that, stop, slow down if it's a little bollard or just a different paving pattern or...
Yeah, we could do that. We can do extra striping or something there as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
A specialty paving,
Just give a
potentially.
lot of clues so people aren't...
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just had Theo pull up this plan. I think this helps kind of illustrate that truck as well, just to kind of show how that would work. That's obviously the taller podium there. I think are we 14 clear there, maybe even a little.
Maybe even a little bit more.
A little more there.
Yeah.
But that allows those trucks to get off of Arcadia and also out of the sidewalk as well. So you're not blocking the sidewalk when you're doing deliveries. Yeah.
And that's a big truck, and he's got to back in there.
Yep.
I say they have to back in there. I know they're good, but, right, we all have to pay attention.
For sure.
And can you tell me a little bit about the retail space? What are your current thoughts on that?
Sure. The market will certainly dictate which users are out there, but we did consider a restaurant use when we started looking at the parking. So we have enough parking. It kind of depends on how you look at the parking. We have enough parking for a restaurant user within our space, meeting is it 10 per thousand? 10 per thousand. But we want to maintain the flexibility, if it's not a restaurant, that we can use some of those stalls for residential as well. So there'll be a little bit of a flex there, I guess, between the residential and the retail parking. But I think ideally we'd look at a restaurant use. But again, the market will dictate which retailers are out there. We'll have ultimate flexibility. We kind of went with a 3,000, I think, square foot box, which is a smaller restaurant, certainly. It's not a larger restaurant, but we've seen a lot of restaurant users in that range. So a little larger than a fast casual, but not as large as, maybe a really high-end restaurant.
And just for context, this line right here, that's a wall that separates secured private parking for residences, and south of that, this is open to the public. And so when Nick is saying a little bit of flexibility, meaning that some of these open public stalls may convert to a residential stall, just not secured.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be a permit sign or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the art walk. It's the same concern. I saw the little squiggle for the art. I thought that was really cute.
Haven't been commissioned yet, so.
I'll let Theo touch on it as well.
Yeah.
But art walk is something that we've looked at in other markets as well, and it's kind of an idea of, you have, whether it's permanent or rotating, but an opportunity to have different art installations along that walkway as you move. Obviously, we have a little bit of grade to work with there. So incorporating the park was kind of the first piece. And then whether that all art walk happens within the park or does it kind of march as it goes down, I think we're kind of excited to see what artists' ideas are for that area.
Yeah.
And it's the same, it's exciting, but once again, the concern is there's two parking or, vehicular entrances in there. And I know you'll think through that. And then what is the difference in height between the deck and the public?
5 feet.
5 feet.
And plus or minus, yeah.
Depending on where you're looking, right? We've got a lot of grade.
This and this
The
is
flat
yes,
area,
yes,
right in the
gotcha.
middle.
Yeah.
5 feet.
5 feet. Yep.
And you've got some planting back there between the two?
Yeah, we have some planting along here and then some either built-in or furniture pieces along the edge of the resident amenity.
But ultimately, there'll be a railing.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm not worried. I guess for me, the northwest corner is the most inviting kind of public area. It's retail. It's for the retail area. But and then that southwest corner in front of the lobby, I think is also attractive, as well as the sidewalks and the whole southeast side. I think is attractive. And I know you're still kind of, there's been a ton of work on this, I can tell, and I really appreciate how much effort has gone into this in the past 2 months. I worry a little bit, because the deck, you're opening to the west because that's where the park is across the way, and it's going to be an active space. It'll be a good place to look at. I worry a little bit about, the private deck versus the small public park, and I think how you handle that transition. That's a small thing. It's just a design thing. And the sidewalks feel really nice to me, and Eden is not the most pleasant to walk on at the moment, and this makes it a lot more pleasant, I think, on that southeast side. My worry before was coming up 100, you're going to see that facade from way down at 62 because OLG is a low building and there's a lot of parking and there's the fields there. So there's a lot of open space. It's always going to be open. So those trees, I think, on that south side are important, getting some good-sized trees to kind of screen that a bit, because that's going to be a very visible facade.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna let other people ask questions. I'm gonna go through my notes here. But I do want to commend you on how much work has been done on this. I appreciate that it's buried. I appreciate the very active Arcadia and the north side, and I'm hoping that when that bike path comes across, where's the entrance to the bike facility? Right there on the north side, which I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, this is the bike path along here, and it wraps around the east side and connects to this network. And then we have a bike room right here.
Okay.
And then this is fitness, yoga.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm hoping we can work on that bike path all the way across there and kind of connect the quadrants of Edina so people can bike, kids can bike to school, people can bike here, people can meet their friends here. And I'm going to move on and save some of my other comments, but I do appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you.
On this.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, real quick. By the way, just to echo what Meriwether said, thank you guys for taking our feedback to heart and incorporating it. I think you actually incorporated everything that was raised. Just like I'm not thinking of something that was raised that wasn't addressed in some way, so that does come through, and I think we appreciate it. Two quick questions on the park. So how are you going to ensure that it's an active space, that people know it's a park that they can use, for not just members of the public? Do you have any sort of, I know it's conceptual at this point, but do you have any ideas about how to make sure people know that's a space for them to use and a space that will be actively used by people who aren't just residents of the building?
Yeah, and my thoughts are, certainly there's the idea of maybe some programming from time to time. I think also making sure that it doesn't feel enclosed and really opening it up, but also making it a distinct area, and so I don't know exactly what that means as far as materials, maybe some art that's within that, or how we incorporate the landscaping, but you don't want it to feel like a kind of a tight area that you don't want to go in. We want it to be open and inviting, and open and inviting to anybody walking up and down. So I think the landscaping, I think how we, the materials, the art that hopefully is all around there with some local artists, as well as thinking about, as Theo mentioned, where are there benches, where can you sit, how does it kind of feel with the overall district. But I think it's a good thing for us to keep in mind, so it doesn't just become this concrete pad.
Okay. Yeah, because it's kind of small. That's not a criticism of it. It is a small space, and half of it's the stairs. So, yeah, the more you can think about just keeping it active and usable in some practical way by people, the better, including by maybe, like I think you mentioned, having places for people to sit.
Yeah.
And then on the affordability of the units, do you guys have an understanding or a sense of how long, for how long are those units going to be affordable?
It's usually 20 or 30 years, depending on the municipality. I apologize, Director Teague, I'm forgetting her name that we've been working with.
Stephanie Hawkinson.
Yes, on the affordability, and as mentioned, it'll be in the development agreement, but we see 20 to 30 years just depending on the municipality.
Okay. Thanks. Those are my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss, any questions? No? Commissioner Day?
Okay, first a quick comment. I don't need to echo what other people have said already, but I guess I'll build on the community engagement piece. So I thought that was really well done. So I appreciated the letters from Our Lady of Grace and Gesture Concepts, and really engaging the community in the process. That's something we strive for and try to stress that on our developers. So appreciate that being included in the packet. few questions, I guess, around the transportation and parking and whatnot. Parking, as far as that goes, so how does, this is more of maybe a general knowledge question, but parking, I assume now that all the parking is going to be underground, that you'll be charging all of your residents to park. How does that jive with affordable housing, and how does that, like, how do you manage that with affordable housing units, right? So to me, if you're charging everybody, if you're not exclusively limiting parking for affordable housing, that they're probably going to be priced out of that. So I'm just wondering how your company deals with that.
Yeah, we've, again, worked with different municipalities in different ways, and in many cases, a parking stall is not required to be provided as part of it. Other times, we've worked at where maybe there is one or maybe half of them. So again, we're open to it. I think typically we haven't seen that the parking is provided with it, but certainly open to having further discussions.
Sure. Yeah, just a question how that, aligns with all of that.
Sure.
All right. Question further. As far as, I guess building on the community involvement piece, so the plan here along Arcadia, is that right now, I believe that there is on-street parking along Arcadia. Does this eliminate on-street parking in front of your development right now?
No, right here, we're actually proposing parallel stalls up on street.
Okay.
Right along here, yep.
Okay. Yeah, because I was wondering how that discussion would go with Hilltop, because I know there's a lot of overflow from Hilltop always over there.
Yeah.
So
I do, whether it's our issue, I do think with the new road alignment of Arcadia, with our project and with the project across the street, there will be less parallel parking on Arcadia in general. So I think that as we've discussed and as we've been kind of told, utilizing the ramp that is underutilized today is a big part of that. Also, as mentioned, we do have the parking on site here within the building, so we're hopeful that that drives a lot of our retail into that area.
okay, thanks. All right, as far as bikes go, so you did point out on the north side, like there's a bike room, right, for your residents.
Correct, yep.
Where around, and I guess in the retail, I don't necessarily get called out, and maybe it's just not on the original concept drawing, but where does the public park their bikes around in this unit?
Yeah,
this
so
area?
apologies, they didn't get called out in the renderings, but they would be adjacent to this retail space and we would provide 8 to 10 hoops, or 4 to 5 of them for 8 to 10 parking stalls, and that would be short-term along that area. So equally or easily accessible and off of that path.
Sure. We'd probably look at the southwest corner as well. I think it'd be nice to have a few at the front door as well, where the lobby is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess my comment as a bicycle user would be to put that bike fix-it station maybe over on that west corner, right?
Sure.
Or on the southwest corner, because right where it's is now, I don't know that you'll get a lot of people really realizing that it's there, right? It might just kind of sit unused, right? It's kind of nice to have it closer to like a public space and whatnot, if there's room for it. But.
Yeah, I think that southwest corner is a good opportunity. I mean, you see it in the renderings, and something that, as Theo mentioned, this plan did get a lot better, so we do truly thank you for your comments. And I think that southwest corner is going to have, now that the retaining wall is gone and you're at street level, and there are wide sidewalks and you can kind of see this plaza out there, to me that almost kind of becomes a gathering area, to your point, where I think that's where, frankly, the fix-it station should be, and a bench and things like that. So I think we
And the parking stall, the bike parking stalls right
yeah,
there, too.
and the bike parking stalls as well. Yeah. So.
Okay, a couple other, I guess, comments and questions. The pool that you have on the activity deck, was there any other, I guess, consideration uses for that area? I mean, I always find it interesting that we're so set on pools in Minnesota, because they're only used for a very limited amount of time. But as far as like a playground or a dog walk area or anything like that, how does the pool decision reached? And is it just because it's that much more attractive from a market value standpoint?
It is an amenity that is desired in a lot of market rate apartments. I admit we haven't fully designed that. We have had a lot of projects that the pool has become what I call kind of a glorified hot tub, a larger hot tub, because then you can leave it open all year a little bit easier. It shrinks in size. There's a lot of projects in town that have gone that route. That amenity deck is not fully programmed, but we do think some offering like a pool or hot tub is probably something that we'll need just for this area and what our competitive set will be that we'll be competing against.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that because I've lived in an apartment where there's pools, and I swear I've only used it like 3-4 times.
A day like today would be great for
yeah,
it.
absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%.
Not as much in January.
And then I guess the last thing was around the art park and just making that more inviting to the public. I guess for me, if I'm walking past that area, having it open and everything, I still would shy away from entering that area. I would consider it a space that's reserved for the apartment building. So even if it's like an informal Grandview Art Park sign, or and then open to the public in parentheses or something, really, very explicit to people walking by that they are, allowed and welcome to stop there. And I think you'll get some of that general feeling by having the retail space right next to it, right? And people will kind of overflow down to there a little bit, but they might be hesitant at first. So I don't know. That's just a general comment. So I think that's it for now. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, another question.
Can you talk to me what you're thinking right now about the sustainable measures above and beyond the building code?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of meetings already. We're meeting with, just lost her name. Grace Hancock, thank you, on Friday to kick off that process. But we have a strategy in mind, I think, that will go above and beyond. We've done this a lot of times in projects. We use high efficiency systems in the apartments, high quality insulation, good quality materials. So more to come on that.
Okay. I just wanted, you're not being held to anything. I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on that. Oh, and a comment, and I might talk about it later too. We did get a feedback on Better Together Edina about the queuing for the school on OLG. So I appreciate that there's no entrance on Eden Avenue because there's no one in much more of a hurry than a parent kind of dropping off a kid. Hoping to change that by getting more buses or something, but I do appreciate there's no entrance, vehicular entrance over there. I'm done.
Thank you. I have a few questions, but first just want to echo the same sentiment that really appreciate you taking all of our feedback and incorporating it or considering it in some way, and that'll be evident with the few questions I have. I typically have a lot more, so really appreciate that. Feels good. I just have mostly design questions just to kind of understand why you settled on certain things. One of the feedback points was the height along 100, and I have my own assumptions of why you shrunk it 1, but did you consider anything else? Something much taller along 100 and stepping down closer to Arcadia?
Yeah, I can touch on that. And to Commissioner Felt's comment earlier, we did hear that from the mayor, that he said, I would be in support of a taller building, even if it was taller than the Jerry's building along the highway. Admittedly, we looked at that. We kind of drew a new plan. Anything taller than what we have does change the construction type. So we instantly go from a wood frame project to a type 1, and it is concrete structure. And that unfortunately just wasn't financially feasible. We started to kind of run into almost I don't want to say a point tower, but a kind of a rectangular tower along 100, and it just didn't feel right. It wasn't feeling as good as looking at this and bringing in some of those step backs. But full disclosure, the biggest reason was the change in construction type.
Sure, yeah, that's the assumption. I know we talked about it before, but certainly that has impacts on the design as well as the articulation that comes with different height spatially, because as you look at different sides of the building, some look longer and maybe more monotonous than other sides. And we're kind of amidst an era of building a lot of monotonous, long, filled out buildings. So I'm very on guard with that, and I want to make sure, at least on the design standpoint of what you're presenting, we're not going to look like this era that we're seeing all over the place of a mix of materials. And I think Edina does a decent job with kind of upholding the quality of materials. However, there is a lot of sameness that we're seeing in Edina because of that. So I welcome something different, but that kind of leads me to my next question of materials. Can you kind of walk us through,
Sure.
The board and, just tell us what we're looking at and where that's going,
Yep.
respective of the plan?
Yeah, so obviously this is the brick. This is what we were talking about going up at all corners and along most of the base, where people will be at it and touching and feeling and experiencing this. This piece number 3 right here, this is that champagne colored metal panel that we see as kind of the ribbon datum point that kind of wraps around in certain locations. And it helps delineate the brick from the other materials, but it also does something else in that it, when it caps the top of a building, it becomes kind of a cornice element, or when it comes down and it comes across the entryway and it becomes a canopy piece. So it has multiple uses over here. It becomes kind of the piece that sits above the public or the private amenity space. These two materials is the architectural cladding, so that makes up these other white areas. This gray one would be a spandrel detail, so you can see right in between these windows there's just a darker color there to kind of vertically tie those windows together. And that's kind of the design party, is this verticality, and so that's why we're bringing the brick up full height in locations and then pulling that metal panel that kind of wraps around it and caps it, and then tying those windows together with that different color. And then just dark bronze windows. So these two are the window frames, an aluminum window and a residential window, clear glass and spandrel glass, and then just miscellaneous dark bronze metal panel to kind of tie those windows together.
Thank you for walking through that. That helps.
Sure.
You can drive around town and see a mishmash of when brick meets panel with lots of different colors, and if you don't do it right, it looks awful immediately. So I'm trying to play devil's advocate in what I'm seeing here, and architecturally, I think you have a good balance of it. There's a couple spots that I would just offer some opinion from a design standpoint. This is a good view on the north, on the right side of this picture. Kind of looks like, just a solid wall going up between the windows. If there's reveals or something else you could do there,
Yep.
I think that would help. Same goes for the southeast side, where you start to see maybe on this side too. Because that'll be more prominent from the roadway. And
I think some of that will be influenced when we finalize the unit design.
Sure.
So right now that's where a kitchen comes in, and we can't place any windows in there, but maybe that kitchen moves, or we break up the fenestration pattern so it's not quite such a long span right there.
Yeah, I'm glad you showed us the panel, because at least from how this is depicted, I don't know if it's just me, but it has more of like a greenish, goldish hue than what I'm seeing there.
The renderings are hard. That's why we bring this stuff.
I want to stick to that. There's other greens in the area, and I think it'd be better to distinguish yourself instead of trying to match. Other part, the transparency piece. I mean, when we're talking, more of a comment and a question, but you kind of brought up the 40% as, usually it's 35, at least from sustainability. The more windows, the less sustainable you really can be with how much you lose in heat and cooling. So it makes sense, as well as the privacy. But were there other considerations elsewhere as you kind of evolved from the sketch plan to here of where you're going to bring more light and opening? Was that kind of accommodated mostly with the retail space?
Mostly with retail space, but then you can see we actually pull this glass up one floor. So these two corners are quite open, but those are units behind.
Oh, okay.
So those are unique units and kind of premium units, but we wanted that architecture. You can also see it here, where we have kind of a two-story fenestration expression. We wanted that to kind of carry up to to this band. So in those locations, we did actually kind of break away from the typical 40% for that residential unit, just because it works better on the outside architecture of the building.
Okay, thanks.
But
On the sound side, it's kind of funny. The state has something when they increase the speed limit on 100 from 55 to 60. I mean, that makes more noise. So the fact that others have to mitigate against decisions like that is silly to me. So whatever you got to do it. Thank you. Other design aspect, just to confirm. So the sidewalk, which is a welcomed addition. I know you mentioned along the west side you have a 10-foot wide path. Is there a reason you didn't consider kind of an expanded width of the path since it's intended for multi-use? Sometimes you see up to 10 feet as you go around a building to just provide a little more space, a little more accessibility with people moving differently.
yeah, so we have 10 foot on that side, 8 feet everywhere else. And so we feel like that 8 feet would be wide enough for multi-mobility.
Okay, and I guess I have a comment kind of, pretty much that back path, which is great to see, but just making smoother turns if you're on a bike versus walking.
Yeah.
It looks good for walking, but not biking
Not for
when
biking.
you come around a corner. So that'll be more of a comment. Landscaping east and north of that path. I know a lot of that's out of your boundary, but what is shown there is what is existing, right? So how much of that are you going to obviously protect or enhance to kind of provide a better buffer between users of that path and the freeway?
Yeah, anything outside of our property line, we're going to try to protect as best as possible. And on this embankment, there is quite a lot of trees right there. So hopefully, if we save that and we have the building onto the west side, then we have kind of a nice corridor through there. Outside of that, there's not a lot of room to enhance if we want to keep that 8-foot sidewalk.
Yeah, so I see how the sidewalk steps up and it looks like it goes on to the right of way of the state.
Yeah.
So I guess it'll be a comment too, but to buffer landscaping north of that
Right along
path,
there.
if you're doing stuff not on your property, let's go and do that.
Which is what we originally had. We're not sure we're going to be able to do that sidewalk in that fashion.
Right.
We'd like to. We want to talk to MnDOT about that, to widen that whole area. And to your point exactly, we had 5 trees, I think, at one point. We kind of said, kind of showing trees on property we don't control, so we didn't want to show that and then not be able to do it. But we would love trees up there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and as we know, like with the city right away where it's boulevard and sidewalk, it's acceptable thing. So it seems like it's hopefully a quick conversation.
Yeah, generally MnDOT has been open to landscaping. I'm not sure about the sidewalk, so we'll
get
see
there.
what we can do.
Yeah.
Okay. Regarding the use, you mentioned restaurant. Was there any other retail considered, or is that kind of the primary use still that you're going for or designing around?
It's going to be a pretty clean box. So that could kind of be anything. So It could be service retail. I think just with what's happening across the street with Jester Concepts, with Hilltop, with hopefully the on-ramp or off-ramp eventually going away, it would feel really great to have a restaurant there. The patio would work well. Even we're seeing a lot of coffee shops now. There's a lot around town that are taking larger spaces, and people are working there more often. So maybe a larger coffee shop too. That could also incorporate into it. So
yeah, totally support it and like the design you have around it. And then I guess the last thing to kind of tie into Commissioner Day's point about wayfinding, it's part of one of the values, at least we strive for in the Vision Edina, like this community of learning. So like the art park is great, but at least helping people move more clearly and communicating that it's all part of learning. And I feel like making nondescript things for people to figure it out or make it veiled in some way isn't the way we ought to go. So however you can help advertise where people are and what they're doing would be nice. And then a big part of the framework was really establishing the identity of Grandview. What's the name, you guys? I mean, is there a name? What kind of identity are you creating so far? What's on? Are you able to share anything right now?
Not yet. We're hoping to get more feedback tonight, and then at council, and then we'll go into those steps. But that's a huge part of the next step is kind of how do we start to get an identity, to your point, for the building.
Yeah, because we've lost some opportunities around just where you enter this area. There really isn't Grandview signified, and that's just been a very easy goal to hit. So whether that's in how you name things or certainly name the retail component, it's important to keep in mind.
Sure.
That's all I have for questions. Any other questions that came up? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Just one, probably a silly question, but on some buildings, there's a big sign that says renting 1- and 2-bedroom apartments now, and there's like this massive banner that hangs from the top of the building. Is that allowed in the city of Edina, or I'm just curious about that?
Oftentimes they are too big, and we have to have them. We do have size and location requirements. They are allowed to provide leasing signs, but there are certain requirements.
Gotcha. I just thought that big space that you were calling out was for that purpose, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, maybe it's for the name of the building, and then I'd understand having that. Anyways, that's the end of questions. So thank you guys so much. Do you have any other?
Yeah, maybe just one thing I want to touch on that I think will probably be discussed is you had mentioned a lot of buildings in the area look similar. One just concern I have that I want to address before we step down is if we, I think the current recommendation is that the 60 feet would have to be brick or stone. That will change the architecture to what you see more typically in town of brick and stone and then a different material on top and less creative architecture. So I just want to mention that, maybe I'm biased, I think our team did a really great job with this architecture and we're really excited about it. If we are required to have brick and stone for the bottom 60 feet, we're probably going to look at more of a bottom top architecture. So just wanted to comment that you had made the comment, everything around town looks the same. If you require that, then that's usually why, because you're going to have that brick and stone for 60 feet, and then it's going to transition to the other materials at the top. So I just wanted to mention that because I know it's in the report, but other than that, I don't have any other comments, and we very much appreciate all your comments. As we mentioned, this significantly improved. We're really excited about it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, and this is a public hearing, so we'll begin that piece of the process. So as mentioned, if someone is still waiting in the virtual room or not, I'll give you info for that, and then we'll open it to people who are here in person first. But just to get in the queue, if you'd like to speak remotely, the number is 786-496-5601. Enter conference pin 2407-064#, and then press *1 to get in the queue if you'd like to speak. And while you do that, we'll give you time to do that. We're going to open it here for people who are in person that would like to speak. Same goes as for the community comment. You have 3 minutes, state your full name, address. Green light gives you 3 minutes. 30 seconds with amber, and red, your time's up. Welcome anyone who's here that'd like to speak. All right.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Steve Brown. I live at 5528 Halifax Lane. I'm here tonight to urge you to recommend that the City Council approve the rezoning site plan and subdivision of the project for 5100 Eden Avenue, subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report. I'm urging you to do this for 2 primary reasons. The first, that it adds people that are needed to help activate the restaurant and the park across the street in the Grandview Yard area of the old Public Works site. There's been a lot of discussion about that site, a lot of concern about how we're going to activate that site. I think this project provides part of the solution. It provides the people you need to make that place active. In addition to adding people, the project will also help activate and energize the whole area with the proposed restaurant that will bring additional people to the area. So you've got the folks who live there, and then you've got all the visitors that are being attracted by whatever that retail space turns out to be. The second reason is that this project delivers 14 affordable housing units. You're probably not surprised to hear me say that. This will help achieve the goal of 1,804 affordable units by 2030. This location is a terrific location for affordable housing. My colleague Tom Kuhn, who's sitting back here, put it this way: this is an ideal location with a bank, a grocery store, coffee shops, pharmacy, library, both limited and express bus runs, a hardware store, and a pizza place, all within an easy walk. So this is just a great site if you're going to try to put affordable housing. Second, you've got easy access to the highway. So somebody who has to get to work, this is just a superb location. So great spot. I would also add that there's a public park just across the street, so some of you may have concerns about where the kids going to play. There should be a park right across the street that they can use. So I think, again, it's a good place for affordable housing. In addition to these reasons, I think you should support this project because the developer carefully listened to the concerns that you raised during the sketch plan review and has made a number of worthwhile changes to their project to address your concerns. And a lot of you have acknowledged that tonight. The final reason for supporting this project is the developer is not requesting any financing from the city. That's unusual when we have affordable housing involved, and I think that's an important consideration. So I urge you to recommend that the City Council approve the rezoning and the site plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else who'd like to speak, please come up.
Hello again. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. I have mixed feelings on this project. I know Opus is a very, very good company. I have been on site doing my own work when they have been building a building right next to me and talked to literally everybody else that worked on that site. And I know a good company when I've worked with one, and they are excellent. I do have reservations about the size of the building, just the massing and size of it, because things happen during construction that, where are they going to stage materials, equipment? If there's a project going on, being built on the other side of Arcadia at the same time, it sounds like these will be happening at almost the same time or overlapping. That's really concerning, unless OLG wants to rent out a portion of their northwest corner of their land. It's still across the street and across the traffic circle, but that creates issues as far as how it's all going to happen. And then we throw in the Vernon Avenue 50th Street bridge redo over Highway 100 happening at about the same time. Timing is really dicey here. So those are some of my big reservations. Being rezoned to PUD, my understanding is that the underlying current zoning of planned office development is something that still needs to be considered in setback size, all those sorts of parameters. And this is an office zoned POD piece of land that, if this project happens as proposed, you're taking away future potential office space. And there isn't that much in the whole area. The one that's right by City Hall on the other side of 100 has taken away potential office space. So that's something else to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who is here in person that would like to speak, please come up. Please. Now. Okay. Not seeing any. We will turn it over to see if there is anyone who's called into our remote room. Is anyone in the queue or in the conference?
Yes. So
Okay.
we do have two people who are in the online waiting room, but they have not signaled that they would like to speak. So if you would like to speak at this time, please press *1 and we can get you on the line. It looks like we do have one person who indicated they would like to speak now. So operator, can you please unmute their line?
Yes. I can't tell, am I on or not?
Yes.
Have I been unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Connie Carino, 4509 Garrison Lane. So I was taking some notes, so I hope I hope I can get to everything here in the 3 minutes. But I have only recently been aware of this project. It is the primary business district that I frequent for groceries, dry cleaning, dine-in liquor store, other things. But I am concerned that this area is already so congested. Especially, it's alarming that more apartments are proposed especially along that very, very narrow Arcadia Avenue. So that's a concern I have. It was unclear to me, and again, I need to probably go through more of the materials here, but would there be underground parking for visitors to that retail space, and also visitors for the residents? I also am really concerned that if you recommend to approve this PUD for the project, you are allowing the building coverage to increase from 30% to 68%. That was startling to me to hear 30% to 68%. That's more than 50% impervious surface to a district that is saturated with hard surfaces already. I'm a bit puzzled how increasing building coverage by 50% fits the city's sustainability policy, but it certainly doesn't seem to align with the climate action plan. I also am concerned that whether this project or others, that affordable office and affordable retail zoning is being eroded by PUD to accommodate apartments. We need a balance in Edina, and this district has already seen an increase in multifamily housing. So those are a few questions and some comments. Thank you for your time and your service to the city.
Thank you very much. For the other person, have they pushed *1?
Yes, they have. So operator, can you please unmute the line of the second person?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Susan Lee. I live at 6708 Point Drive. I do not wish to negate the thoughtful comments made by the Commission on the current proposal. However, I believe that the main issue regarding rezoning to PUD is being overlooked. I served on the Planning Commission from 2014 to 2020 and resigned after 2 terms for many reasons. However, the main reason was the lack of formal instruction or training for the Commission and an ensuing lack of a shared basis by which to know how to apply the city's zoning code. The current overuse of the PUD zoning category by the city is a travesty that residents are finally waking up to. When I began on the Commission, there were but 5 PUD districts created during the entire first decades of Edina's existence. Now, less than 10 years later, there are 23. This is most definitely spot zoning. I am guessing most of the commission is unaware of what the actual purpose of a planned urban or planned unit development PUD is. It is to allow for a mix of uses among different buildings on the same or several parcels. It is rarely, if ever, applied to a single building on a single parcel. In addition, the City Planning Department repeatedly emphasizes and thus implies that parcels must be rezoned to PUD so that affordable housing can be included. This has never been a criterion of a PUD development. Let me state that again. Affordable housing has never been a criterion for a PUD. There are many other ways for the city to require affordable housing without contradicting its current zoning. Edina's residents need a planning commission to enforce and champion our current zoning, which came directly out of an extensive, comprehensive planning process just 5 short years ago. Whether a plan is developed 2, 5, or 10 years ago, as was the Grandview framework, if it involves the hard work and hundreds of hours of the residents of Edina, it needs to be championed by you. Please do the right thing. Support the Planned Office District zoning designation. The Grandview framework has already identified the parcels for multifamily or high-density development. Hold the developers to the expectation the proposals must meet our city's zoning requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else
Yes.
in the queue?
We have one more caller, I believe, as of right now. Operator, can you please unmute the line for the third caller?
My name is Lori Grotz, 5513 Park Place. PUD seems to be used these days to be able to sidestep the zoning requirements. It's more or less anything goes. I think that this site is too large for the area. The amount of traffic in that area, it's not going to be able to handle it. You have Our Lady of Grace. There's going to be housing on the west side of Arcadia. You have Eden Avenue that is used by all of the buses. The city has the plan to close the south entrance onto Highway 100 from Eden Avenue. And the city plans to close the 2 northbound entrances to Highway 100 on the west side of City Hall. So you're going to be shoving all of this traffic either to 50th Street or to Vernon Avenue, which are already too congested. It makes no sense. Now, I've seen how the traffic has changed in that area over the years. My husband and I have leased space in the Edina Executive Plaza, which is the building just to the south of the old Perkins site. And we have leased in there for about 29 years. So we have seen how the buses pile up down Wilson Road, and now they're going to have to navigate 3 roundabouts, which were not needed, but only built because you've got excess TIF money that needs to be spent instead of giving it back to the county, the city, and to the school district. There's too much housing in here, too much traffic. That little bit of a park that they say is going to be for the public, there's no place for the public to park. It appears to me that this little public park might be like the public park that the residents paid for through TIF over at the Lorient. They called that a public park. But if you walk over there, it's not a public park. It's an amenity for the residents that live there. And it's essentially a place for the residents to park their dogs. And I don't think that the city is getting any benefit out of this. Plus, from the photos that I've seen of the building, it looks to me like it's just more Soviet style building in the city. And I don't think that it belongs there. I think it belongs I think it should stay for POD. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else in the queue or in the waiting room?
No, we do not have any other callers. So I think we are safe to proceed.
So welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. So moved. Public hearing is closed. So now we will take it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate. This is our chance to kind of share questions, comments, if there's discussion. Maybe one of the first points we could do is address some of the questions that were posed during the public hearing. If there are anything, Carrie, that you could answer regarding maybe the purpose of PUD, the comp plan, and I think other pieces could be addressed through discussion. One easy one was mentioned was the parking, where it is for visitors that is established to all be within the structure and hidden from view, as well as for the residents. And maybe there's another question regarding staging that the applicant could answer, but perhaps you know.
Yeah, and I could take that one too in regard to the management of the construction. So what we require, it's one of the conditions of approval, is that they submit a construction management plan. So in putting that together, they work with our building department, city engineer, to come up with a plan for where that staging is taking place. And as mentioned, with all the activity that's going on in this district, both city projects, all the roadway projects, and the development that's going on, it's going to be relatively complicated. And so leasing off-site space for parking is usually part of that. But we wouldn't issue a building permit until that construction management has been taken care of. In terms of the zoning and the PUD, I touched a little bit on that as part of my presentation. This is the path that the city has chosen to utilize PUD. I think we came up with that ordinance maybe 10, 12 years ago as a way to review these redevelopment projects on a case-by-case basis based on what the comprehensive plan guided areas for. Another approach that we could take is to rezone these sites to be exactly consistent with the comprehensive plan, to allow the density by right. But the path that has been recommended by Planning Commission and City Council's past is to go on this case-by-case basis where the city gets certain things in exchange for others, flexibility in the zoning, and we're essentially writing a zoning ordinance for each site. It is true, I think we're up to 25 PUDs in the last 10, 12 years from when we started. That is something we could consider into the next comp plan or future Planning Commission work plan items to rewrite our zoning ordinance. That's a possibility as well. So something to consider, but this is the path that we've been on in regard to the PUD. Also, there was a question about affordable housing. That's always been a criterion, specifically as a way to obtain the affordable housing. It's one of those criterion that's on its own.
I guess to be clear, though, I mean, any proposal with over 20 units has to have 10%. However, it ends up being a choice of whether they incorporate it or they pay a fee that goes into the fund.
That's correct. That's right from the affordable housing policy that the council has adopted. And it is suggested that PUD is the form of zoning that the city can require the affordable housing. It is written into the ordinance in our PCD districts, where they get over that 20,000 or that 20 unit threshold, that they're required to meet that policy as well.
So I guess to be clear with one of the other questions, and the desire for POD to remain, the comprehensive plan guides us other than that, right? And that's what you're talking about and referring to as how PUD is used to kind of fill that gap, and there is a choice on the table that the city could take to just amend the zoning with a comprehensive plan update, which could have happened last time.
Correct. Yeah, but as we saw on that zoning map of the Grandview districts, there's 4 or 5 different zoning districts within that mixed-use area that allow all of those type of uses. Like this site only allows office. Comp plan guides it for more than that, as it does the entire area. So yeah, this if we were to do a rezoning of the entire district, which is possible, we have to take all of those different uses in mind and figure out density calculations for each and all of those. But the path that we've been on for the last 10 plus years has been this PUD approach.
I guess one thing to just clarify with that again and to reiterate is this property is guided in the comprehensive plan for a multi-use center type of use, as well as the other ones nearby, as well as the Grandview development framework imagine and guides it to a similar type of use. So
it does.
Just to clarify, at least with all the work that went into establishing that and to getting the comprehensive plan update, it's in line with the guidance.
That's correct.
Okay. I think the other couple questions could be answered by the developer, and then I'll open it to hear. Maybe you could speak to staging and what your plan is. We know you have to submit something like that, but I think it'd help.
Not sure yet. Certainly we will we'll look at everything that's happening in the district, work with the city, and try to understand what our best options are. We develop a lot of urban sites, so we're used to having very tight restrictions. There's opportunities to look at where we can stage, whether it's on site or maybe we have a conversation with OLG, I'm not sure, but certainly we recognize that that's an important part of something we'll work with the city on.
Okay. Thanks. I guess one note was also impervious surface. I guess one thing to look at, and maybe Carrie, you have info on it. The current building is surrounded by a bunch of asphalt parking, right? That looks close to what this footprint is, although a little smaller. The increase here that's discussed is the structure, right? Not the pavement, or is that included in that?
Yeah, it's the building coverage that's exceeded here. The code requirement for POD is 30%, and this is 68%. But when you look at the impervious surface of the existing, that's one thing that sometimes we do that comparison. What's the impervious there now compared to what's proposed? We didn't hear unless the development team knows that off the top of their head, but it's going to be somewhat similar. It is a lot of pavement there.
I'd recommend, at least looking into that between now and the city council, just to have that information. But with that, I'll turn it over to kind of the other commissioners to share comments, other discussion points.
Can I quickly respond to one comment that was made? So no TIF has been asked for this, which I really appreciate. And I got 2 points. And the PUD process allows us to request things. We requested quite a lot in the sketch plan, both the commission and the city council did. And there's quite a difference between the sketch plan makeup, both in terms of massing and, where it sits above or below ground. And another comment was about the Lorient. The TIF funding for that, I think that developer buried utilities all the way north from the north side of the Oddfellows building all the way south the Gateway Bank, because those sidewalks, and also in an area where a lot of people walk with strollers and bike, all those utilities got buried as part of that TIF money, so those sidewalks are more usable. And there was also a correction on the right turn from Sunnyside onto France Avenue, because that's a dangerous intersection. So I think some of that TIF money really helped the public in kind of navigating that site. And I just wanted to, because I appreciate how that site was changed through the use of TIF money. Okay.
Any comments and discussion points specific to this project? Commissioner Smith.
I could kick us off here. So I think there's a lot of really good things for sure with this development. I think the feedback that we provided in the sketch plan review, a lot of it was incorporated. I think many of the commissioners agree with the effort that was put into making those adjustments. I think that's really good. With regards to just a couple of points, it's not in any particular order here, but the affordability, I think working with the affordability team with the city, we should at least have a set of options of not just 10% affordable units at 50% AMI, but looking at what's some other ratio configurations that we could look at that would make a project feasible for developers. So I think that's going to be important. When we saw the Grandview guidelines, right, there was a lot of row homes that was contemplated in that design. And I think each one of them had separate lot sizes that in this plan was all incorporated together to have one unifying kind of design, which I think is good. The alternative would be that if they were purchased all separately, then the designs for each one of those could be all different, and it wouldn't be something that's coherent in that space. So I think it makes sense, if I'm not mistaken, to purchase all those lots together and then build one comprehensive design. And so when I look at the row homes and I look at this, that's what I'm comparing this to. And I think this meets that. From a massing perspective, pushing the massing closer to Highway 100, I think makes sense. Of course, you have to balance that now with the sound concerns that the state has. And so I know developers would look into that, but I think that was a good move and opening up that space to Arcadia. With regards to the public park, I think it's a fair comment that it's a small location that would feel like it belongs to the residents. And I heard a lot of comments up here today about how do we mark that in such a way that folks know that they could visit this park and it's a public space and not a private space. And I think a lot can be done there. And my previous comments about how do you connect Arcadia right in that area might be an answer. Having some kind of walkway to slow the traffic down, or just to show, hey, I could walk from this public restaurant open space right over here on this nice walkway that's designed that invites me in. If you don't have that, then the entrance points would be on the south and the north, which is hard for someone to think about as, oh, I could use those to get to that public park. So I think that's something that should be factored in. Traffic. So I think that's a very fair point too. As this area develops, you're going to see massive amount of congestion on Vernon. And it's already there today. You know, I kind of talked about that earlier with service level E and service level D in the morning and the evening. That would just continue. As the senior co-op goes up, you're going to get more volume of cars coming through. And as people start using those restaurants, you're going to get a lot of that volume. So what's going to happen? I think what might happen is that, yes, people will find their own ways to get around the city. Eden Avenue is definitely going to increase in traffic. Folks are going to use that route to connect to the other side of Vernon versus taking 50th and Vernon to get across to the west side of the city. I drive there almost every day, running my kids around, and I have to stop and play all these tricks to time when cars are going to come, who's going to make the left turn, so I can get around it, so I don't have to wait in a long line to get stuck. And that's just going to increase. I don't know what the city could do to alleviate that because it's so built up already. But that I think is going to be a bigger concern in the future as more development comes in. So I don't know if we could get around it. The last question really is, if we had office space here versus housing, which one drives more traffic is kind of a question to the traffic manager if he's still on. But I think either way, it's still going to be a pretty congested space. So that's not really on the developers, I think. That's kind of more for, it's a larger discussion on how we use these roadways, but I could just see congestion increasing over time. However, overall, with what the Grandview design guidelines were, what the developer has done in terms of improving the design of this building, the massing, the setback requirements from 4 feet to 10, I think that's important. The walkability around this area, and making the best use of this awkward space, I think I'll be in favor for it. Of course, with all the sustainability goals, et cetera, that was called out as things that we have to put in place, I think this is the best use for this space and a really good spot to start that entrance into Grandview. So that's kind of my comments overall. I know there's like a lot there, but I think, this is going to be a good project for us to start from. And down the road, with the comments from the callers about POD versus PUD, I think that's something that we have to revisit. And I know we have a section after this to talk about work plan items. This could be something that we could consider on there at some point. So that's my comments for now.
Thank you. Others, yeah, Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, there's nothing really that hasn't already been covered. I did allude to what I thought how good the staff report was and preparing us for this discussion. It's my compliments to the city staff. I thought they laid out all the issues, pro and con, and I'm for this. The one. To use the process of PUD and the flexibility that provides to me is key. That's exactly right. It gives us the flexibility to move this project forward. And the one drawback was, we're asking a lot: building heights, building materials, transparency, all this. I think the project team addressed all of those things that they were asking for. We pushed back, and what they provided were, I think, very sound solutions to all those things. So yes, they were asking for things. We countered. They presented some wonderful solutions, and I think this project. And the other one is that I think it's the right project in the right place. The density. The coverage. This is the place for it, and the design. They put the height in the very most southern part of the lot. So it's not towering. So I think it fits in there wonderfully, and I think I'm really excited what this whole area across the street, when that develops, is going to be this incredible face on Arcadia. And the other one is the four-sided nature of the building. I mean, we've talked about that. I think they accomplished that too. So I think it's a very good project here.
Thank you very much. Other commissioners?
That's fine.
All right.
Okay.
You got it.
All right. I don't know. Honestly, it's a tough discussion. I see both sides. I thought our callers raised a lot of good points tonight, and but I also at the same time think this is, I'm impressed with the development plan that came in front of us tonight, right? So we offered a lot of feedback in the initial sketch plan review and incorporated a lot of that, and it's kind of there's a lot of pros and cons in terms of what we're looking at tonight. I have concerns around the congestion and the amount of traffic. I think we've touched on that quite a few times already. It definitely adds a lot of people into a space between all the developments that are going on around us right now and how congested that area already is, right? So that's a fair criticism for our callers, to bring up, right? And a fair concern, absolutely. Something that I'm concerned with, and something really that, in all honesty, is brought up to me a lot by people, other residents of Edina. If I mention that I'm on the Planning Commission, one of the first things they say is like, "It's too crowded. Can you stop them from building more apartment buildings?" I say, "Well, no, that's not our job, right? It's to consider these proposals as they come forth." But right, it's just something on the top of the mind of a lot of Edina residents, and I think it's a fair concern. The other con in this instance is we are losing a planned office district, right? We're losing an opportunity for people to have a place to work, right? So one of the things in our last meeting that we discussed was around the Cahill district plan, and if you recall, I was very, very adamant about defending the office space that was allocated in that development plan, as well as the industrial space, because if you keep building residential space, you're just pushing jobs further outside the city, right? You're achieving density in a specific area, but people have, to have somewhere place to live, to play, and to work, right? So if you get rid of places to work, now you have a lot more people needing to commute outside of the city, or you lose some of the benefits of density that you've gained by building a 7-story building, for example, with good walkability, right? But people still need to leave because now there's less jobs in the immediate vicinity around them. So that's definitely another thing bouncing around in the back of my mind as we consider this. And then I bristle at the suggestion made by the caller that we don't have a unified approach in terms of how we're applying these things. Or trained appropriately. It's pretty clear to me, and I think Carrie's made it very clear, right? And you've made it very clear. The city has adapted this approach, right? We use PUD with specific purpose and intent. That's what we've decided to do, right? If you like it or not, right? We do have a unified vision around it, right? We're not just kind of cherry picking, right? Is it spot zoning? Yeah, I'd say it's spot zoning, right? But we're kind of zoning around a new reality that we're facing, right? In terms of a demand for different lot sizes, different types of housing, different densities, different uses and whatnot. And it allows us, so I'm going to quote, because I found this article earlier from the Star Tribune. Director Teague was quoted in a 2017 article from the Star Tribune, right? The PUD process, kind of allows both sides to negotiate benefits and trade-offs. For instance, this was a specific example, but in exchange for allowing them, the developer, to have increased density in building heights, right? The city is gaining, so on and so forth. This is an area of public space, new plaza, et cetera, right? So we're giving the developer flexibility to go taller, to really make this economically viable on a small section of land in order for it to work for them. And to get the affordable housing goals that we're trying to meet as well. Right, so again, whether you disagree with the approach or not, I think it's consistent. We're applying it in a consistent way. Do we need to change our zoning in order to rely less on PUD? Definitely a fair topic of conversation for us to have. But at this moment, again, I'd say I would bristle at the suggestion that we're not following a uniform vision for that right now. We are doing as we're supposed to. Right. Okay. So that's kind of cons discussion around PUD. As far as positives, obviously, it's to me, right, the space in terms of activating the neighborhood provides a lot of benefit. That single-story retail on the corner, in terms of being across from the future park and restaurant and the senior co-op, provides a lot of benefit. So it's great to have that type of activation in that area. And I think with the bike paths, walkability and stuff that is increased in that area, that's great. So there's a lot of pros and cons to this approach, and it's definitely, like I said, not an easy decision to make, right? I think the PUD application is valid, right? They've met, I think, the requirements of the PUD, but then it comes to us do we want to get rid of the POD, right, in exchange for the pros and cons that I just talked about. So I don't know, that's not, I don't know, I guess it's to spur discussion around the rest of my commissioners here as I elaborate my thought process, but all right, I can keep going.
Yeah, so the current zoning guidelines is POD, but the comprehensive plan is mixed use, and that comprehensive plan and the Grandview plan are asking for something other than the office. So I'm looking at those to guide us and to help us in the zoning process. And I think the PUD, as we're instructed to do, is a give to get. And I think as long as we're engaged in the process and not afraid of asking, I think it works well. And I think this project has changed quite a bit, and I think it's changed for the better. So for me, I think the PUD kind of worked in this situation. I do want to say, I am all for discussion. When people call up and say that they don't like this or that, I appreciate it. I appreciate people being comfortable giving their opinion. I appreciate being in the argument. I appreciate talking with all of you. I appreciate listening to City Council and kind of coming to a consensus. And I appreciate when my mind has changed. I remember being anxious when I was like, oh, this building's back. And I'm very happy with it. But I took my time and went through it on 3 separate occasions, and really think it's a much better building. So the roundabouts, okay, and I'm also going to say we need to have denser cities because we have to create spaces where people can get out of their cars. And I think this is a situation where you can work from home or work from the bank or work from Jerry's or work in that water treatment plant, which is underneath the parking lot, which is hidden and no one knows about, but it's a really cool space. And you can walk for groceries, you can walk for the dentist, you can walk for a tailor, you can walk for a hardware store, you can walk to the bank, you can walk to medical, you can walk down to St. Stephen's, you can walk to pay your utility bill at City Hall, you can, the pizza place. So I think this, if someone is working from home and going into the office like rarely, this makes a great place where someone isn't reliant on a car. And I do that proposed bike route across the way. I think if we can get children on buses, because I know my daughter bused to Normandale French immersion and had to stop in OLG every morning. So it is quite the dance to get all those right. But I do know there are a lot of kids, especially middle school and high school, would be interested in biking to school. So if we can get those children out of their parents' cars and biking or on a bus to kind of help. We've got to find alternative ways to kind of get around rather than rely on cars. Like if we're between the ages of, it depends on the maturity of the kid, but if you're like middle school to 60, you can ride a bike, and so leaving some of that area for other people. So that's what I think increasing the density in this area is important. The roundabouts, I think, help because there's no idling cars at stoplights, so they reduce greenhouse gases. So I'm all for the roundabouts. I am okay with the reduction in brick. I think the mix of materials and the lightness of materials makes for a very elegant building. I think this design and the mix of materials is more elegant than the previous one. So I'm okay with the reduction of brick on that one. I do think the south elevation needs a little bit of work just because I said you can see it from 62. So I just think, think long term, and that kind of goes along your comments about some of those spaces. That construction management plan, that will be in the record, so people can refer to that and they can call the city about that. And I think having a really good, because Opus, you build it, right? Okay, so you are notified and are aware of that. So I think if you have quality contractors, they're more willing to work. So I think we'll have a better relationship with that than if somebody else was constructing it. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, and I do really appreciate how much this softens Eden Avenue. Eden Avenue is not a nice place to walk along. So I think those wide sidewalks, the setback, the meandering, all of that really helps that corner. Okay?
Commissioner Bornstein.
Yeah, just to keep it moving. The brick is one thing maybe we can just talk about. I don't know if I have a strong view on it one way or the other. I might benefit from the rest of the commissioners' views, but it is a nicer material. And it's the one thing that sort of staff said, maybe you can include a little more brick on the facade. So I'm actually just, I don't know. I don't think I'm the expert on architectural materials. I do know that it's a better material than whatever the other cement board is or whatever that is. So I'd be interested to know what the rest of the commission thought about staff's recommendation to require a greater percentage of the facade to be brick.
That's a fair question. Maybe, Carrie, you can speak to some context because it goes from yes, but all, right? So, I mean, is there a sweet spot? Is there a range that staff's okay with of supplementing different design parameters?
Yeah, I'm no architect either, so where there definitely could be add more brick, where, I'm not sure, but being this is a PUD and we're writing the ordinance in, there's room to move, whether the magic height is 30 feet, 40 feet, 20 feet. I guess that's up to your consideration.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to architecturally micromanage in a space that we're not experts in. At the same time, people want to live in buildings, they want to rent buildings that have high quality materials. Brick's a higher quality material than the other stuff. That's where my opinion stops. I just think we should discuss it and focus what our recommendation would be if we're inclined to approve it. And I think it sounds like most people think that most of the PUD factors are met. There's been changes to the project made that have taken it from maybe not meeting those factors to meeting those factors. But the materials are important. So, yeah, if we could discuss that.
Yeah, thoughts?
So I see the brick is on the lower level around the perimeter and in those public spaces on the second floor above the leasing office and on all four corners. And I think this is an elegant mix of materials. I think if the brick was, say, dark brown, the previous building had a greater range of colors, but because the spandrel is just a softer color, it's a architectural spandrel panel metal, right? is just a softer color than the brick. I think they blend together nicely, and I think there's enough variation, the setbacks where the balconies are and where the balconies clip on, that I think it's elegant enough, and that you do have those fairly full corners before it sets back for a balcony, that the brick at 60 feet all around doesn't bother me as much. I'm much happier that this building has changed from the previous one. I think if it had, so I'm comfortable going without the brick because I think there's enough interest there that it's okay. Those are my thoughts.
Quincy, in your professional architect opinion?
I do not have an architectural professional opinion, but all I could think of is just 4 different dimensions, right? I think we're talking about a couple of different things. I think we're talking about design, look and feel, architectural design. I think we're talking about quality. I heard quality of material, brick versus, I think, something paneling, I think it was called. I think we're talking about cost, right? What costs more, what costs less. And I think we're talking about safety. So I'm not sure from the city's perspective, the requirement of brick, is that a design requirement, or does it tap into a quality or a safety issue that has to be met? And from the designer perspective, which one of those dimensions are we working towards? Is it a design thing that we're trying to meet, or does it impact safety, or is it a cost issue, right? So like, out of those 4 dimensions, how do they stack up from the city's request and the designer's decision on using that paneling material?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a safety. I would be surprised if it's a safety issue. I don't think that's not like bricks stacked on top of each other. That's a prefabricated brick panel that's hung on the side of a building to look like. I mean, it probably is brick, but it's not like bricks. It is. Is it? You would put? Oh, it is laid bricks. Oh, okay. Interesting. So that's just like a thin. Oh, great. Thanks for correcting me.
Sample panels get heavy if they're the real bricks.
Then maybe if it is a safety issue, you can I thought it was more of an aesthetic preference.
Yeah, the staff recommendation really comes from the thinking that Commissioner Bornstein had laid out. It's a higher quality material. That's what the code required. So that was kind of the consensus of staff when we got together and reviewed the plans.
Yeah. You have other comments?
So with regards to quality of materials, what does that mean? Like if in 10 years we'll have to you would replace the paneling, but you probably won't replace the brick. I just want to understand the quality of material concern with the building. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, just background in materials. I mean, brick and stone are more enduring materials that stand the test of time compared to other things. I mean, when you look at buildings that last and have relatively low maintenance and strength and historic character, they tend to be of higher quality, as in more resilient, like brick or stone. So metal panels, just they're not tried and true as much, and they tend to age poorly, relatively speaking.
Can we ask the design team to talk about the life expectancy of the panels in a little bit more detail about the spandrel panel, metal panel?
Yeah, the architectural wall panel, these have a 20-year warranty. If we were to increase, I mean, it comes down to economics, like Commissioner Smith said. So if we were to increase the brick, there's a chance that we would use a different material than what we're proposing here that would maybe not be as high quality. And the concern on our end is that you have a really good quality brick base and then something above that's maybe more residential quality, just to try to work out the economics of that. And so what we're proposing with the mix that we had and the design that we had is something that's commercial grade all the way around the building, better warranties, better quality, and kind of matches their commercial grade better together, if that makes sense.
And a 20-year warranty doesn't mean it's going to fail in year 21. I mean, it's going to last a little longer than the 20 years.
That's definitely not necessarily true. It means it will get fixed within that period if it doesn't survive, so.
I guess just my thought on it. So I know last time when we reviewed this, right, our main concern was around, like, give us something more unique, right, that's more visually appealing to the area. And, you know, I think this has accomplished that in terms of what the proposal lays out with the brick on the four corners. And the design elements incorporated around the different materials that are used. I go back to, I apologize, I forget your name. What the developer said about what it might occur if we decide to have brick up to 60 feet is this look of brick and then kind of two-tone shoddy material that seems to be prevalent around us right now. And my immediate thought was an apartment building I used to live in Uptown, right across from B'nai Makaska, called B at, I believe it's now Axion Greenway. I don't believe it's Calhoun anymore. But we're trying to avoid, and I can hold this up, but I mean this, right, is like brick on the bottom and then cheap material on the top, right? Even so as much as like, you know, cheap aluminum looking paneling. I thought it was a terrible design and visually unappealing.
How far up does the brick go?
The brick only goes up about the top of the first floor. So I can, right, as I thought about that, I was like, this is not what I want to see pop up all over Edina, right? I want to see something more visually appealing, especially at such a prominent position off of 100. And I think that's kind of what we were going for when we asked for it. Changes to be made during the sketch plan. I think this reaches kind of a happy medium with the different material mix that we see. I understand the staff recommendation, but I think the recommendation, you know, really what we should be going for is, again, that difference in look, something more unique so that we're not, as the one caller called out, said, like, not a bunch of Soviet block style apartments, which I don't believe this looks like that. But we don't want that, right? We don't want that all around Edina. So I think this helps avoid that from happening.
Yeah, good.
Just to add, I shared the same sentiment as you. Like if I were to err on one side, it'd be to add more high quality material, because that's just maybe. If you have the choice for more quality, like, why wouldn't you choose that? And it's, again, this is something that will likely be here for a couple generations or longer, so we're going to see this a lot for a long time. So that's something I wish, typically, historically, we've had an architect up here on the Planning Commission. Susan Lee was one of them who called in. Wish she was here to give her opinions, because we tend to get behind someone who kind of has that expertise, and not all the time is what proposed to us should be what we're supporting, especially when we have the discretion. So I'm that's the point of reluctance for me too. And when I look at the materials here, it differs from what I see in the plans. Like the white to the brick has a lot more contrast there than here, and it's making me a little nervous of how is it going to actually look. So I'm there with you too, and I don't know if I'd put the condition to City Council on it, but maybe it's a recommendation to consider more, and maybe they would have a representative to instruct them a little better. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an element from which they're requesting relief, right?
Yeah.
The 60% requirement, and I'm kind of with you. If I'm going to err on one side, it's going to be towards higher quality materials that someone thought about and decided were appropriate. Brick is a nice looking material. It's like we don't have to think that hard about it. It looks nice. It does. It's higher quality. It's more expensive, which is why it creates an economic issue for them if they have to use more of it, and then something else maybe changes on the top. But I don't know. I'm not comfortable with all this architectural cladding that's everywhere. It's kind of like a nude. I don't know. It's just, my gut's leaning towards some sort of recommendation that encourages the council to think carefully about how much, requiring more high quality material, because we're yielding on all the other areas of divergence from the code, just all of them, which is fine, because you're kind of comparing like apples to oranges or apples to like kiwis or something. It's like an office building. It's not even a comparable to even think about. We're thinking about a residential project with a mixed use component. So it doesn't make sense to necessarily compare it to what standards would govern an office. So it's like, but we're still yielding on everything in exchange for the benefits that this project would do. But the materials I really think is one that deserves maybe more focus. And so however we would articulate it, I would support adding a condition that required, as many high quality materials as possible, including brick, on the public facing portions of the facade.
Which I guess to city staff, there's really not a distinguishing factor because it's every side is publicly facing, or are there exceptions to that rule, like interior balconies or?
Yeah, it's because there are portions of the building that face the amenity deck that aren't really facing the public. So I would say that space in there wouldn't have to be brick, similar to what they're proposing. But all along Eden, all along Highway 100 and the north side.
I think just for discussion's sake, I would support that. I mean, if you were to choose a building that looks more like the panels or brick, I would rather it look more like brick than the panels, as like the popping feature or the higher percentage. So I would probably support that condition as staff does, and would welcome input from. Yeah, sure.
That I'd be just curious to get a little feedback on. Something that we were thinking about is, what if it was the same square footage of brick that you get within the 60 feet, but we had the ability to be more architecturally creative? So you're still getting the same percentage, because right now it says 60 feet. It doesn't say 60%. Certainly not opposed to that amount of brick. So something that we started looking at is, take 60 feet across the whole building. What is the square footage of that? Call it 20,000 square feet for a round number. What if we could have that amount of brick still, but we had that architectural ability to have some architecture to it, as opposed to 60 feet of brick, or 0 to 60 is brick, and then the rest is all going to be, the other material. So just something to think about. So you get the same amount of brick, just might not be only at the 60 feet. Something to think about.
Yeah, I think we just want it to look as high quality as possible. Like we're not trying to micromanage what ratio of this is where, how many feet is exactly whatever. Yeah. And I don't even know what the implications of that would be, like, because we don't know what this. Would that change anything? I don't know. But we wanted to look. The whole thing of a PUD is you give to get, and we're giving a lot of relief on a lot of areas here. And in exchange, the benefits are several. We've talked about them. You improve the parking situation's vastly improved. The pedestrian realm is positive. You added commercial space, which is really good. There's a public park, which is great. Adding density contributes, whatever. And then we just want the materials to be as high quality as possible, understanding there's an economic component to it. So I don't know. I don't think that maybe that sounds like I think we would all be open to creativity and figuring out how do we make the facade look as nice as possible, and kind of nice and timeless and classic.
And we want that as well, for sure. I'm nervous if it goes in how it's written. It's probably going to get redesigned to 60 feet of brick, and then everything above that's going to be the cladding, because that's just economically what we're going to have to do. We can't have 60 feet of brick plus additional stone above that. It's just going to not financially work anymore. And that's why I'm trying to think of creatively, how can we want that much brick too. We want that much material of brick. So I guess we'd have to get creative, but if you had you're going to get the same amount of brick if we did it that way. It would be architecturally spread out. and you'd still get all this other material, but you'd get the same amount of brick that you'd get if you had the condition that was written as the way staff did, if that makes sense.
Is that more brick than we have now? I'm just curious.
Yes, it would be more brick than what we have right now. I don't know our exact, we'd have to look at percentages. It'd be an additional, I think, yeah, we looked at additional 5,000 square feet of brick from this current layout.
Well, I'd be curious to know what you all think. I'm the last person to start, again, micromanaging you guys about architecture, like, you know. So, but I like that you're, you know, at least thinking about how to incorporate more high-quality materials at the levels that people are going to be, like, looking at.
Yeah. Yes.
And, you know, how that's going to feel for people walking around, you know, in that area. And so what does the rest of the commission think?
And just on that note, right now it is all brick at the base for that exact reason, you know, so that we do have some of the other materials lower than 60 feet, but the base is all brick. Correct? Brick or glass, correct.
But and by base, you mean the first level?
Yes, first floor, yep.
So yeah, I mean...
in some parts, it's the first and a little bit more. And in some part, it's just the first level. So that it's the first and second in a couple of parts.
And in some parts, it's from floor all the way to the top. So if you look at, say this facade here from the ground floor to the top of the building, you're brick and glass.
Okay, Mr. Bennett, Chair Bennett.
Yeah.
You know I'm an architect, right?
Oh. So
I just thought I'd introduce.
With that, I think
myself.
I'll sit.
My name is Meriwether Felt.
Okay,
we
so
never
let's
said you
defer to
weren't
you.
Meriwether. We
All
just
right.
said none of us were.
I'm telling you, architecturally.
I was looking this way when I said that. So architecturally, can you speak to that?
Was like,
can you speak to that?
I think the base is all brick. It goes up to the second floor. So when you are human scaled, 6 feet tall, you're going to see brick in front of you, and you're going to see brick going up on all the corners. And the way they've got the brick and the balconies play off of each other, I think is very elegant. Architecturally, the things that I think need to be worked on are the south elevation and the ribbon a little bit, but I think the building is really quite nice.
How do you like the egg on my face right now?
I just thought I'd tell you.
So the one rendering I have up on my screen, which is the south elevation, does not show brick on the second level. Kind of like right above the leasing where they have the raised windows. It's paneling right there, back to that one, right? Isn't that panel on the second level? Over there, there's brick.
Yeah, this is brick, and then this is all brick here. This in the middle is the architectural class.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, in your perspective, I think all of us would like to see more brick if they can afford to do it elsewhere, maybe closer to that level. I mean, does that change the vibe? And at least could we put a recommendation of, proposing an alternative in addition to this to City Council with maybe a different rendering? I mean, is that something? I know we've sometimes seen options, but usually there's one proposal. But maybe the City Council, if they see something, they could change a condition to be like, hey, we'll approve this with the condition of choice B.
What do you guys think? I mean, can I just add it? Do you think, you proposed, instead of 60 feet up, giving you the flexibility to make 60% of the, whatever you said, a certain percentage of the exterior brick? Okay.
Whatever 60 feet from the base up is of brick, say that turns out to be 50% of the building. I don't know it's probably more than that. I don't know if we know those numbers. I know we started looking at it. But whatever that percentage of the building is, from 0 to 60, take that percentage and say, you have to have that percentage of brick on the building. So same amount of brick, just the ability to place it where it is that architects think it should go versus.
But do your architects think that would improve the aesthetics of the building? Or would it degrade it relative to what it looks like now? We're curious to know what you think.
More brick is brick is a higher quality. So yeah, more brick on the building will look good, and we'll find a way to make it look really good on the exterior. Work within the design that we've already come up with and add it to the amount that we agree upon.
Can I ask, if we're asking for more brick, I want to be a little bit flexible on the 60 feet. Like if you want to see it on the first, on this elevation, if you kind of want to see it above the first floor on a very prominent elevation above the leasing office, which is, you had your reasons for doing that spandrel, but above the leasing office, and that's kind of their public face, your brand, so like maybe adding brick in a couple of places where it's very visible. Yeah, I just don't want to be too prescriptive and say, because I think that ties their hands, and I think they're saying they're willing to work a little bit more towards that.
Yeah, I think if you give us a number and we agree to it, then we can find the best spot.
I think
I'm trying to be a jerk, but
No. I guess
and I don't want to give you a number because I think it ties your hands too much. I think if you're like, we're looking at this elevation, if you want to see a little bit more in a public space, like around the retail space or around the first two floors, I just ask for recommendation
Okay.
in those highly visible spaces.
So, I mean,
I think they're good at what they do.
Yeah.
And I think if we're asking for a little bit more brick, I think they'll do well by it. I don't want to say you need 55% because we're going to get
So I think numerically what they're trying to say, at least for a condition of where their hands can be tied and where they're okay with that, is we can make the condition to be as whatever percentage coverage, if the upper 60 or the lower 60 feet were all brick, equates to find a way to make that much brick happen in a creative way with a preference toward strong corners in the first two levels. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, right? I mean, whatever that ask shakes out to, because again, the fear is if we implement that, we see what Ryan was showing, of this is a design output that will look just like the Avador or look just like everything else. And that's not what we want, right? So however we can accommodate more high quality materials.
We don't want that to, we want more high quality materials, but we don't want the consequence of it to be a less appealing design or anything that degrades the quality that Meriwether said that is already inherent in this drawing. So would that, if we instead of saying 60 feet said the equivalent percentage, would you still be able to deliver the same quality of architecture that you feel like you have here, but maybe higher because the materials, there'd be greater percentage of materials that were higher quality?
Yes. We can do that, yeah.
Negative to that then?
I certainly do not.
Because the design is they can change it, right? There's nothing in this to say they have to build this exactly this way anyway.
Not right now, but at least to the city council it would be something close enough to the point where, I mean, we've seen minor changes happen after it's approved, but that's a question that goes to the planning department to have their own discretion. And then ultimately, if it changes enough, it would come back to us and the city council, which we've seen before. So Commissioner Bornstein, that was your first comment. That's for great discussion. Are there other comments you have?
That's why I try to pick one.
Okay. Any other comments? I guess, thank you guys. I just have a few that tie on to what everyone else was saying. As we look toward how to make a decision with this change here, comprehensive plan should guide us, number one, and the framework, the Grandview Development Framework's a portion of that. As I'm very critical of upholding those documents. And when I saw the first proposal for this, yeah, I was not. It was not favorable. The balance of it was not favorable, and I don't feel like it achieved all the conditions of the PUD. But what I see tonight does, and it makes up for, I guess, lost opportunity across the street, which was supposed to be the catalyst. And I feel like in some ways this is taking on, serving as a catalyst of its own, that the framework didn't really identify. It showed mostly like a diverse array of residential type uses, but this really is a mixed use development in a small spot. So for me, a key addition was the retail component on the northwest side, and I would strongly encourage, a restaurant use, and I'm glad that the design is kind of going toward that with outdoor patio and the parking to accommodate restaurant, which can be a high parking situation. So the use was a key ingredient to that. The design as a whole was a key ingredient. So again, I think we want to err on the side of more quality materials, but how you maintain the shape, brought it down, and really engaged the street, it's what the public's going to see and experience. It's that public realm. So I always reference page 18 of the framework, which is like this view of Arcadia, and you weren't achieving that before, and what we approved on the other side of the street didn't really achieve that either, but I feel like it's a lot closer, where you have this retail component that's going to be active, people using it. One thing I'd recommend is when you build the entrance to the service garage, which we know won't be used often or during the day when people are there, maybe that entrance is, heavy duty pavers that kind of make it more of a bridge the gap between the restaurant and that park, maybe bring the sidewalk through the park. Something to just continue to engage the street front, which again has changed remarkably, and it's a shame that the city invested a lot in a wall that's along Arcadia and Eden, which is an imposition if you're walking around there. It's not nice to walk right along a wall and then have a building above it. So to have that come down and now have this engaging landscaping and a transparent facade is really a win, because I would have thought you're stuck because of that investment. So the fact that we're undoing that, is a sign that we have a development team that is willing to get creative and spend more money in areas that others wouldn't. So that's really great. Hiding all the parking is a huge win that everyone should celebrate. There's no parking that you see here. And to interrupt the street front with, a few stalls is just not worth it. So that was done really well. Before, I think you had two entrances for the parking, to access the upper level and the bottom, and you combined it into one joint entrance. It was really smart. And then the looped sidewalk, that was definitely a key that I think, we're like, we'd like to see this, don't really know how it could look. And I think you responded really well to that. And I guess, again, the change I'd offer is, widen the sidewalk at the expense of some landscaping, make it a 10-foot path. You can make those decisions later. I'd encourage a wider path and softer corners as you round the building and connect to Eden. Those things you can change probably with, and maybe Carrie, right? I mean, those type of changes can be kind of made more on the fly as they get closer to construction.
They can. You can also make that recommendation as well as an added condition.
I think some of it's getting a little micromanagey of the architectural side, but maybe it's something that could be accommodated before the city council sees it. You have some recommendations there. And then,
well, one thing,
yeah.
sorry, as we talk about the sidewalk, and I know you mentioned around the northeast corner, right? So one thing I wrote down as a potential condition would be to try to protect that landscaping as much as possible. Like, I know it's not in their direct lot line control, we discussed that, but I'd hate to see that be destroyed for a staging area and then it becomes just nothing afterwards, right? So
Yeah,
Sorry.
that might be a condition order. I don't know. Was that identified in the staff report? Because I mean, it's technically MnDOT, but MnDOT and I mean the city's given away right away to use for staging. So
Yeah, it's they wouldn't be allowed to cut landscaping or anything down adjacent to the property. They'd be responsible. They'd have to replant or do whatever. So,
but that's MnDOT's call, right? Not the city's.
well, we would want to see that protected somehow. Maybe it's a construction fence. I don't know what. It's one of those details that gets worked out as part of that construction management plan.
Yeah, and that goes kind of to the north corner because the landscaping kind of disappears. But if that could, buffer the path, it might be worth putting a condition to just, I guess, augment upon that. The other part I think is key is the affordable aspect that is in this project. A lot of times with something of this quality, that is written out of the deal and goes into the fund. But like we had some people testify, this is a prime spot for affordable housing because of the walkable nature of the area. And while we're replacing a place for people to work, we're providing more places for people to live and then work in the area. So I think it's a great trade-off that maybe is not focused on enough, but it's a really good thing to see that in this project instead of going into a separate development elsewhere that we can't necessarily control as much as right now. Yeah, that was it. The big thing for me too was the brick and the quality of the material as a sticking point. So I think we've vetted that out, and again, there's just so many good things that were addressed since the sketch plan review that totally changed my mind. And I think, to Commissioner Strauss's point, will really accelerate change for good in this area. It'll add congestion, but it's adding people that should hopefully walk around more than drive. So that's what we wanted to see with the Grandview redevelopment framework, is the hope for change. That was the key part. So how do we transform this area? Keeping this an office building isn't achieving that. That's why the comprehensive plan was updated, also to include more density, which this is right up against. So I support this. I'd add maybe a condition, if it weren't clear, to protect landscaping around the perimeter and maybe increase it along the path to the north where possible.
I guess building on the landscaping piece, I know there was talk about working with Grace Hancock, our sustainability manager for the city, around how to do the sustainable elements. Is that conditionable type of activity, right, to ensure that partnership continues? Or is developed?
It is, and that's listed in the conditions.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
That's all I have for comments. Any discussion here, or people generally, it feels like people are generally supportive. I guess I'd just skip to it and welcome a motion.
We had discussed a couple minor additional and modified conditions that differed from what was in the staff report. So if we're going to make a motion, maybe we can try to articulate those.
Okay.
So you had one,
Yeah.
Amy, which was to add a condition to protect landscaping on the perimeter and enhance it where possible on the north side of the site. And we discussed a condition about the material quality that sounded like also adding a condition that the project incorporate at least the same percentage of brick as if it had used brick 60 feet up on all public realm facing sides. So that, I just feel like we need to. We're trying to increase the quality of materials without constraining their ability to be flexible and delivering a high quality architectural design. So I think how to articulate that matters. What's your thought, Meriwether?
I feel the ask is to kind of use the same amount of brick, but use more down lower, like transfer some of it down lower. Is that what?
The same amount as what?
Right, the first 60 feet of brick, they've got some brick that goes all the way up
Yeah.
to the corner, so they're going higher
Yeah.
in some areas. And they've run the numbers. And I think I think where the brick makes the most impact is where humans can interact with it and see it.
See it more often.
Yeah, the first couple of stories. So if you want to see some additional brick in some primary locations, entries, and on the first level, and some second levels, we're asking for kind of a balance of what the amount of brick they have now and bringing some of that brick down into some more prominent locations. That was my understanding
Yeah,
of
like
the...
keeping the amount they have now, not reducing it. Keeping where they have it now and increasing the amount they use slightly on the exterior as a whole so that
Yes.
some additional areas can also have that higher quality
Yes,
material.
if we can have some additional brick, that would be great. Our emphasis is on those...
The first two levels and the
first couple
prominent
levels.
corners.
Yes.
And I heard them to be saying that if we said
The first 60 feet, then it's going to be...
that the equivalent amount, an amount equivalent to the amount that they would have used if they had to meet that 60-foot requirement, that if we required them to use that same amount on the structure flexibly, that they could maintain the architectural standard they've set here and improve it a little bit by just using more brick than they currently have and adding it in to some of the other prominent areas that you were discussing. Because I like that. I think we all like that it goes to the top in some of these areas and doesn't stop. If just more of it could be incorporated into some of the more prominent areas, it seems like everybody is in agreement that that would be a positive thing.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, so it's just a word challenge of like how to articulate in English words that concept.
I think you started the condition off well, and I would just like add if we want to. I mean, you have to define like prominent, so like the first two levels and the major, right? The south elevation. I mean, do we want to be specific or not as much? Yeah, Commissioner Smith. I saw you just ready to speak.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it out there. You guys can shoot it down, okay? I think what we're saying is use the same surface area of brick, distributed however you guys need to, equivalent to the surface area of brick that would be required to meet a 60-foot height. Is that what we're saying? Okay. So that's what we want to say. Meeting all the other conditions in the staff report. Sustainability and affordability. Carrie.
Yeah, so I could take a shot at that. I would agree with everything what Quincy's saying. So you would strike in condition number 1, the final plans should demonstrate compliance with city code requirement in the first 60 feet. Replace it with what Quincy said. And we can go back and review the tape and get it exact. And then I could offer up other conditions that I think I've heard. And then you can agree or disagree. But I heard condition 17, consider a crossing across Arcadia Street, subject to review and recommendation of the city engineer to provide that crossing somewhere along, subject to his review. Windows be installed to mitigate noise from the highway. Protect landscaping and trees during construction, and increase landscaping on the north side of the path, on the north side of the building. Yeah, I guess that's what I had. There may be others.
So I guess we'd welcome a motion, and I don't know if people can reference what you just said, or we have to, okay. I guess welcome a motion. Bueller?
Yeah, so I will motion, right, that the city council approve the rezoning and site plan and I guess subdivision. So it's subject to the findings and the conditions that we've listed out that Commissioner Teague has added on and to what's in the staff report.
We have a second?
Second.
We'll just, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Well, good luck with your meeting in City Council, and thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. All right. Moving along a little more quickly here. So we have our reports and recommendations. We have our discussion for the 2024 work plan for the Planning Commission. There's been things brought up tonight that might be worth considering. I know we have a longer time frame typically than we normally would about, hey, we got to agree to this and approve this.
Yep.
Where are we in that time frame?
Ooh, I didn't bring it specifically, but we've still got all of August. So 2 meetings in August to still consider it. I think we might have to make a decision sometime in September. And
Okay.
then I think you present in October.
Do we have a work session plan?
We can do that in August.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, kind of what I'm thinking is, I mean, it's getting late. Want to respect people's time. And maybe it's worth reviewing what you have here because some things have changed. And then even this cannabis thing came into the play. And we talked about a couple other things tonight, but we also mentioned this last meeting is there anything else people are thinking about? So maybe we use this meeting to review this, kind of just get the total list, and then maybe at the work session, we establish the final list. Because if we list everything, it's not practical to achieve in a year. So
it'll get taken off.
But it's good if we talk about everything, maybe tonight quickly. So maybe our goal is to spend 15 minutes max, go through these, just see if we understand them, and then add the other couple items that maybe have been discussed and are on others' minds, and we revisit during a work plan. How's that sound, Carrie?
Yep, that sounds great.
Does that sound good, everyone? Okay.
That's great.
Carrie, do you want to kind of present going through this? Or do you want me to kind of just lead?
Yeah, I could just quickly, the number one, that's just our review of land use applications. Nothing to discuss there.
It's on every year.
Yep, it's on every year. The next is the consideration of areas of potential change for the comp plan, so setting the stage for those areas that we want to study. This was the one that was taken off the work plan last year.
Yeah, and I guess one quick note on that. That affordable housing project that was proposed that was a POD, right, on the west side?
Yep.
So, like, the comprehensive plan didn't really guide it in the same way that this area was guided much more clearly tonight, the grand view with the framework. So, the importance of having those identified has become evident the last 2 years.
Yep.
Okay.
That's why I listed it as number 2.
All right.
And not that, yeah. So the next one is any follow-up to the Cahill plan. So that could be, in the recommendation, council still hasn't approved it yet, but they held the public hearing at their last meeting, and so final decision still to come. But if the land use that you recommended, where there's that mixed use up in the northeast corner, so instead of waiting for a project to come in and considering a PUD, maybe we want to rezone that whole district to mixed use. Something to consider. So that could be one of those follow-up items from the Cahill plan. And maybe there's other zoning ordinance changes that come from that as well. So that's number 3.
So I guess, yeah, like on that note, here, I'll let you go.
I was going to say, so after the council has adopted the plan, right, and voted to adopt it, we would come in and then potentially change the zoning after they've adopted the plan?
Yes.
I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
Would this maybe?
That's what's being suggested. You know,
Yeah,
by
no,
a lot of these. So I just throw that out as a possibility.
The plan is different than the zoning.
Yeah.
The plan is one thing, the zoning is another. He's talking about changing the zoning to go along.
I mean, does this task
to go along with the plan potentially, or to potentially not go along with the plan, which makes
So I mean, I feel like this could potentially lump into a separate, bigger discussion that we kind of came up with tonight of, do we continue with the PD process as we've been doing, or do we now just try to get ahead and rezone the things as they're guided in the comprehensive plan? Because that's essentially what we're doing when you adopt the Cahill District Plan.
Right. That's correct.
Or do we want to just, I don't see the goal, I don't see why it'd be good to just be specific to the Cahill District Plan if there's other areas that ought to be rezoned in response to the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, that becomes an enormous task.
Yeah.
The thinking was,
do we want to wait 7 years to see that change with a comprehensive plan update, or do we want this to be a multi-year type of thing?
I think it would be a multi-year kind of thing, where we take them a piece at a time.
Well, maybe we put an asterisk to this, because this is a piece of that if we chose to pursue that.
I've got that listed further down too. So for now, it's just the Cahill District Plan follow-up and whatever that might take. You know, there was the talk of forming the
a task force.
Like a business district or something.
Yep, so things like that. The fourth initiative is the parking. That's that continuation of that issue. Number 5 comes from the Climate Action Plan. We can have a discussion on this on the work session. I'm not exactly sure how that ties into the zoning ordinance, but we can have more discussion on that one. And then number 6 is just, this is, in the past, we've just had a initiative entitled zoning ordinance amendments. It's things that we hope to tackle. Sometimes we'll do 5 of the 6, 3 of the 6.
Like when we used to require a basement.
Yeah, yep, things like that.
So kind of smaller things that have come up.
Yep, so one of them is the updating that industrial district standards to be more flexible with the retail space. It ties back to the Drool and Moose issue and making that a code compliant kind of thing. Second one is our building material requirement. This is the 60 foot that we just talked about, the transparency requirements for new buildings and that first floor height. We might want to consider that one. Council has brought that up too as a potential for change. And then 3 is what we've talked about, creating zoning districts that more clearly align with the comprehensive land use plan. So that's a big one. And then 4 is one that's been on our work plan for 5-6 years. We don't tend to get to it, is updating the sign ordinance. That one hasn't been updated in quite some time. So we put that back in. And then the last one is in regard to the cannabis regulations that will be upon us. Doing some type of a study, where do we want to allow the manufacturing, retail. Council will be considering a moratorium at their next meeting that would give us up until the end of next year to come up with a study and a potential recommendation. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but and maybe it's one that we even begin this year.
Okay.
So that's the one that I added tonight.
And do we want to add ADUs?
That's already on this year's work plan.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we get that done. You know, maybe it continues. You know, ones that we don't get done, we just keep going.
Okay.
Till they're done.
Yeah, so I guess that's a lot of stuff. So digest that. Is there anything else that's top of mind that might be worth adding on to the work plan, or we consider during the next work session? Yes.
I don't know. I just wrote down ideas for work plan items over the last couple of days. And, this is already a hearty list. So again, just ideas in terms of things as they've come up. So one important topic of discussion we've had in terms of like community involvement and notice around projects. I don't know if that necessarily fits into our work plan. I've had discussion back with city staff already on how we present, the importance of involvement and getting people more involved, getting people more engaged, excessive visibility around development plans and stuff like that. So I don't know if that necessarily would fall on our work plan, but a framework, for community notice, involvement, better together Edina, making that more accessible, et cetera. I don't know. So that was one idea I had for a work plan item. And then I guess the other one I thought, this is another one where I don't, this might not fit, but as I was like reading through, I was like looking for ideas that other cities had. And we talked about like, I can't remember what city is it now. Is it Maple Grove that has like the interactive map for the development? Eden Prairie. Yeah. So I was like, all right, how do we like engage with potentially other cities and planning commissions or whatever in terms of like best practices or valuable insights and stuff like that, trends around the city and stuff like that. Again, it might not be like a work item deliberately for, and maybe that's not even the planning commission. That's more of the city working on something like that. But I think it'd be interesting to have like a discussion with some of the best, the cities around us in terms of their practices and current obstacles and things that they're facing.
Oh, yeah.
But
Which reminds me, we used to do that.
We did. We used
to have a...
Yeah, we used to do it with the cities of Bloomington and Richfield. We would get together, really it was on a yearly basis. Each city would host, and we'd pick a topic that we would want to discuss. Might bring in a consultant to help. We had other years we've just presented projects that each city is working on and just have a discussion, work session at night, couple of hours. Once big developments started coming and we were super busy with all of our agendas, that just kind of fell away. It was like 2016, 17 was the last year that we did it. We could look to do that again. It was very useful. I think useful for staff, commissions to get to know some of your peers and adjacent cities.
Yeah, to tie on to what you said, that is like the main, I think you captured a main item I wanted to see on this, and we had basically the development review process as one that didn't advance anywhere. But I think it's important to keep that either, review, we keep it the same and add and, communicate the process, because it speaks to this. And at least for work items, there's budget associated with these when they get approved. So I want to get what you said into here, because if we're going to have like a GIS system that's going to communicate, there's a cost to developing that. Mm-hmm. And there's a cost to looking into that to even consider developing it. So I think there's huge opportunity on the communication side to communicate what we do, the process, and just like that whole thing. I think it's still reviewing the development review process and how to communicate it. Like I definitely want to add that to the list we considered during the work session too.
Yeah, why don't I reach out to those communities, see if they're interested in doing that again, and then we can talk about it at the work session.
Any other?
I think TOD one, that's it. That was already covered. So that was another.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
For that bike path one, just connectivity between the four quadrants in Edina, making it easier for people to navigate over 100 and over 62. But I think that's part of that green piece.
Yeah, so that kind of, when we did the decennial update for the comprehensive plan, kind of each commissioner and or a pair would kind of be more connected with a different commission. I feel like that's something where it's like the Transportation Commission, but it's also the Planning Commission. And then is it just no one because both need to kind of happen in concert? So that could be another thing we do in advance of the decennial update that kind of speaks to that collaborative piece that's missing, like with other cities, but also with other commissions, because, I mean, we all look to the comprehensive plan.
And I'd add the Environment Energy Commission and the park and even arts to that.
Yeah.
Not just, transportation.
Yeah, that was, I think we had to cover all of them.
All the commissions, yep.
But it's just something, if people are willing and able, why not, encourage it? Okay. Anything else?
I would just ask, which would you prefer for the work session, the first meeting in August or the second? So you don't have to decide tonight, but something to think about which we want to do.
Yeah.
Are this the first week and the third week?
Yeah, it's the 5th.
Second and fourth.
Okay.
It's the 16th, and I can look it up.
Isn't the 9th and the 23rd?
No, that
16th and 30th?
16th and 30th,
So it's always the last two, or, last two of 3 Wednesdays.
If there's a fifth,
Then it's 3rd and 5th.
maybe.
I know, well, that's what he's
Yeah.
saying it is.
This
Does it-
year it is.
Okay, all right. No rules, are the rules. Any preference? I mean,
Whenever one works for most people, I don't know what everybody's got. I know I'm out of the country on the 16th, so I won't be at that one. That doesn't mean don't hold it then. I mean, if that's when people can make it, do it then, definitely. I don't need to.
Later August.
yeah,
Just send out a
school
poll.
starts the 30th. It's a tough day, but,
Both days work for me.
okay. Same here. All right, well, maybe there's other people not here, so
yeah.
we'll shoot an email and
Yeah.
maybe schedule it that way. Other than that, I think we're good there. Chair and member comments? Yeah, Commissioner Smith?
Yeah. Just a couple comments. The first one is on the bag ordinance. I think at the city council meeting on July 18th, I think the young lady's name was Anna Martinez, who talked very passionately about the city, needing to be bold to make these kind of decisions for sustainability, and I would agree with her. I think we would have to really think about how do we push and drive small changes to improve our sustainability goals, our environmental goals, and really take the lead there as opposed to other cities. I know in a lot of other countries, paying 5 cents for every single-use bag is something that they've implemented. And I think that the city of Edina could take the lead there to help drive that sustainability. So I think whatever we could do to help encourage staff to really push these ideas forward would be very, very beneficial for us in the long term. The environment, we have to take that very seriously. And we got to do what we can to make an improvement in any way possible. The other thing on my list here is on the ADU development. So I don't know if you guys saw it today, but in the mayor's minute, he did talk about ADUs. And so you'll start seeing more and more communication on that coming out here in the next couple of weeks. There's now the Better Together Edina that's open. I know it wasn't on the homepage, but I think hopefully by tomorrow or this week, I'm hoping, Director Teague, that it could be on the homepage instead of having to search for it. That'll be good. And so that's really exciting, right? And we're trying to collect that feedback so we could essentially incorporate that into the draft ordinance that we'll start putting together. So it's slowly coming together, which is really good. The last thing that I have here is, I know in some of our discussions, we talked about the city code section, 36612 and the adjacent code 36618. If if you guys could remember, we were trying to correct an issue, discrepancy in some of the code that we had. I'm not sure if that was covered in the work plan items, but that is something I think should come back on the agenda for us to discuss. I think we had a really good discussion on it, but we didn't get to a conclusion and we deferred it.
It's on your next agenda, so we shouldn't talk in any detail on it. It's
Okay.
on your next agenda.
Yeah. And I think one of the concerns that the residents brought up was that it wasn't communicated well in the public domain. And so I think 612 was communicated, but not 618. But
Right.
618 is tied to it. So I think however we message it has to be together.
Yes,
So
and that's the way it's been posted on Better Together. They've both been noticed. They're both alternatives are listed on the website. So we
Perfect.
can talk about both at your next meeting.
Yeah.
And
so
we
I
needed
think-
that notice requirement. That's why it wasn't on tonight.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we just got to put our thinking caps on that one again and go through it. But that's it. Just those 3 points.
Just quick, I didn't get a chance, but I was gonna forward an interesting article that I saw about land use in Austin, Texas, that I thought pertained to our discussion last week, well, and really not discussions we've had a lot of since I've joined in terms of mixed use, right, in terms of zoning particular parts of the city for specific uses. And I know that there's obviously been a push to have more like mixed use, more density, more industrial can be next to commercial, which can be next to residential and whatnot. And I know I pushed back against that in the Cahill District Plan pretty hard. And one thing I thought that drove us home as I read this article was that approach in Austin has caused a bit of pushback from industries that don't generate much profit at all, right? That can't take advantage of, as land prices rise, it's forcing out like music venues, art studios, theaters, etc., because they simply can't compete in that environment. If you just zone everything for mixed use, well, developers are going to take advantage of residential, and then they're going to put in restaurants, and they're going to put in things that make money, right? That's what wins out. So really just zoning everything to be kind of a hodgepodge and, up for grabs. Zoning for particular areas has its use, right? And I don't want to see us to just abuse mixed use zoning in the hopes that it's going to create more walkable communities and more thriving communities, because I do think we'll lose out on, like I said, a lot of these smaller businesses, things that don't make as much money and whatnot. Like I said, I know, as I said multiple times in the Cahill plan, right? You open that up, and yeah, we think it's going to be this mixed, there'll be a grocery store here, and there'll be an art studio here, and there'll be Moose Drool chocolate over here, and there'll be an apartment building over here. But the reality is, the market forces that they are, that as a scenario isn't winning out in a lot of the communities, right? And so in Austin, they're trying to figure out how do we incentivize as we do mixed use development, and as we zone for that, how do we incentivize like businesses that don't really make much of a profit, that are creative spaces to still inhabit those areas, because they're getting pushed out. So anyways, food for thought and something to think about, but done to share. Yeah.
Great comments. Any others? All right, turn over to staff.
Nothing from me.
No comments or good comments. Welcome a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys.